Pandora's box. I don't understand. Why would you even have a box like this in the first place? According to Greek mythology, the beginning of the earth was free of pain and suffering. The land was perfect, kind of exactly like Eden. Prometheus had created man by making them out of clay, and he will... Okay, well, we might get to that later in another list, but you know, he did a whole bunch of good things for man, the gods got mad. Anyways, Hephaestus made the first woman, Pandora. They gave her beauty, cleverness, charm, and curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. Her name translates to all gifted. But then Zeus was like, you know what would be a great gift? I'm gonna give this girl a box and tell her not to open it. That's like putting a B-Day present in a 4-year-old's lap and being like, ooh, enjoy the wrapping. No. Well, guess what happened? Because they gave her curiosity, it got the best of her and she released all the troubles into the world. Disease, violence, madness, greed, old age, death, plague, slow walkers, and people who eat really loud at the movies. Okay, the last thing to leave was hope, so at least that's a good thing. But you gotta wonder, who in the heck let Zeus be the leader of everything if he made a crap decision like that, with no foresight at all? Why put that stuff in a box? I don't know. Stop it. You're fine. Number 9. Echo and Narcissus. Look, there's nothing wrong with doing a fit check before you leave for work. Give yourself like a, ooh, damn, you know? Do that. Love yourself. But if you're stuck there for the whole day, there's a thing called being a narcissist, which is derived from a character in Greek mythology named Narcissus. The love story between Echo and Narcissus is a curious one, which makes very little sense. Echo was a beautiful nymph who was cursed by Hera when she tried to protect Zeus from getting caught because he was swing. She was now only allowed to say the last word anyone said, hence Echo. Echo was just one of many who pursued Narcissus, but her love was deep and true. One day, as she waited for him to say the last word, she finally went to him when he called her. Immediately, he spurned her off, saying like, no one's better than me, so get out of here, you nymph. You called her, dude. The goddess Nemesis wasn't pleased with his behavior, so she decided to punish him. Nemesis lured him to a steady pool of water where he spotted the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Himself. And he fell passionately in love. Stung by the pangs of unrequited love at last, Narcissus took his own life rather than live without being able to touch himself. Moving on. Number 8. King Midas. Whoever used the term Midas touch and thought it was a good thing needs to read the story again. The Midas touch is an allusion to King Midas, who thought having the power to turn everything into gold was gonna be a good thing, but he didn't specify, and there's always a catch. There's always a catch. After Midas welcomed with open arms Dionysus's merriest reveler, Dionysus said he would give him one wish. He wished to turn everything he touched into gold, because he needed money. He was delighted at first, turning twigs and plants to gold, but then when he got hungry, he found he couldn't eat or drink anything without it turning into gold. Panicking, his daughter ran towards him to comfort him. Out of instinct, he hugged her back because he was a hugger. She soon turned into gold. Dionysus heard his curses and prayers and told him he must wash himself in the river Patroclus. Now, whether everything turned back to normal is debatable. Some stories say they did, others didn't, so there is some confusion there, but either way, Midas learned to appreciate all the things around him as opposed to wanting more. Morals. Number 7. Daedalus and Icarus. We all wanted to jump off the roof when we were kids with wings made from paper to see if we could fly. I mean, why not? Massive metal planes are able to do it, why can't we? Literally, planes are insane. Side note, because science, that's why. But with stories like Daedalus and Icarus, a part of me still thinks it could work, as long as you don't fly too close to the sun. Daedalus was a master inventor who designed the maze for King Minos' palace. He, along with his son, built it together, but the king tricked them and trapped them inside. Daedalus was said to have earned his skills from Athena herself, and soon he fashioned a pair of wings with wax and quills. Soon, father and son were able to flee, but Icarus ignored his father's warnings of flying too close to the sun, otherwise the wax on the wings would melt. Soon, this happened and Icarus crashed into the sea and died. It's a marvel that the wings worked in the first place, but it's even more of a miracle that they evaded the Minotaur, who was like by the way, inside the maze that they built for it. Also, no one explained how they broke out of the maze in order to get into the air into the first place, so I'm not sure how all this worked. If my parents said I couldn't jump off the roof with fake paper wings, then it only makes sense that this would fail, I guess. Number 6, Apollo and Daphne. Ever had someone like not get the hint and continue to slide into your DMs? So in order to avoid them, you like have to turn into a tree so they leave you alone? Ha! Anyways, yeah, me too. It's a tough place to be, especially in the case of Apollo and Daphne. Apollo made the massive mistake of making fun of the god Eros, who, you know, the guy with the arrows that make people fall in love, Cupid. Well, in order to mess with him, he shot a golden arrow at Apollo, causing him to fall desperately in love with the nymph Daphne, and at the same time, Eros struck Daphne with a lead arrow, causing her to detest the god. Apollo pursued her with such fervor that Daphne eventually got exhausted running away from him, so she prayed to the river god Peneus to rid him from her. So she sacrificed her physical form and transformed into the laurel tree. Desperate measures, folks. Apollo was so distraught, he made her his sacred plant and always wore stems of the laurel tree on himself, which means he would have had to break them off the branches. Which, if you're thinking about that, did Daphne feel that as a tree, you know? Did he just keep causing her more and more pain? Ugh.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Alfheim. This is actually a location that is said to be one of the 9 worlds in Norse cosmology. The 9 worlds are often highly debated, and this one is only mentioned twice in the Old Norse texts, but it is a very important place nonetheless. This place is said to be an abode of the elves, which are a class of demigod-like beings from this pre-Christian mythology and religion. Since this place isn't talked about very much in the text, there isn't a lot that is known about it, but it is said that only light elves live here, while dark elves live down in the earth, and that these two kinds of elves are unlike in appearance, but even more unlike in nature. This gets even more concerning when we take into consideration their description. Light elves are described as being luminous and, quote, more beautiful than the sun. Dark elves, on the other hand, are said to be blacker than pitch. Either way, the light elves are the ones who inhabit the land of Alfheim, and the land itself is looked over and ruled by the Vanir goddess Freyr.
Number 4, horned helmets. When you think of Vikings, you probably imagine a very large man, right? With a giant beard, wearing armor covered in fur, and perhaps a helmet with a couple of horns sticking right out on the side. Nice and aggressive. We see Vikings depicted this way in movies, television, you name it. But was it historically accurate? Nay, no, false, not really. Well, aside from looking cool, this would have served no purpose in, an actual combat. Unless there was a guy specifically headbutting individuals, the horned helmet was not historically accurate at all. The horned helmets were only introduced into Norse culture when costume designer Carl Emil Doppler made them for Norse-themed operas in the 19th century. So yeah, false. They just wore their heads, so big Viking heads.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Niflheim. This is a type of hell that comes from Norse mythology, and rather than being a fiery pit like a lot of us think of when we think of hell, it's actually a frozen landscape. This place is ruled by Hel, who is the goddess of death and the daughter of Loki. It is actually believed that her name might be where the name for the Christian underworld came from. I feel like I mentioned Christianity a lot in this. I don't know why. It's just a coincidence. Niflheim is located next to the shore of corpses, which is where Nidhogg lives. If you're wondering who that is, it's of course only the giant snake that feeds on the dead, because why not, I guess? There are said to be 9 worlds in Norse mythology, and Niflheim is the deepest and darkest one. It is said that souls are brought here by Hel's messenger, and from here the souls are simply just kept in constant pain.
Number 2, go berserk. Unlike the fancy horned helmet, Viking berserkers were real. That part was historically accurate. And let me tell you, these guys, specifically, they were terrifying. These Viking warriors would arrive to battle decked out in bearskins. Now the term originally meant to change form, right? Berserker, to change form, transformers, right? All the same kind of combat. So they were emulating a bear while walking into combat. Imagine being the other guy, you'd be scared shitless. Berserkers were considered a higher power when it came to battle. Yeah, no shit. They were the big dogs, or more accurately as they were described back then, mad dogs. More often than not, berserkers could take an opponent down with one single strike. How did they do it, right? Besides having a large build naturally, how did they win so many battles? How were they relied on so often? Today we have an idea of what may have helped aid the fight, and it's bad stuff. It's all illicit substances. Yeah, they would just do some not so great stuff and then run into battle screaming, hopped up on something. The odds that berserkers were on something going into every battle, those odds were pretty high. They're pretty high.
In our number one spot today we have Ragnarok. Also known as the doom of the gods, we can't fully appreciate the new god of war without really knowing what this story is portraying to some degree. Ragnarok would have been the most feared word for the Norse, or perhaps a word that changed their outlook on the world. This was a fate that no one, not even Odin, could escape. At the time there was a belief that there were different ages, the axe age, the sword age, the wolf age, so on, before the world would fall. There would then be 3 years of absolute chaos that included famine and sickness, and following this would be an all-out war in the heavens. This war would see the gods facing everything: Jotuns, giant wolves, giant serpents, and most importantly, Loki, who broke free from his chains and was ready for revenge. This fate saw the fall of the gods, and the fire giant Surt burned the entire world to ashes, killing almost every living thing. While this is a super depressing fate to believe the world will meet, there was a glimmer of hope. After Ragnarok, there was rebirth. It was believed that a new world would arise from the ashes.
Number 10, Pasiphae and the Bull. The gods, man, they love to throw some bestiality as punishment at their will and pleasure. Equus probably would have been their favorite Broadway show. Everyone knows the story of the Minotaur, but do you know how it all got started? Well, let me enlighten you. King Minos begged the god Poseidon to send him a glorious white bull that he could sacrifice. The god obliged. He sent him the most beautiful, stunning creature from out of the sea, because apparently bulls come out of the sea. Anyways, but when King Minos went to sacrifice the creature, he found he could not bring himself to kill such a noble beast, so he just killed another bull instead. Outraged by his disobedience, Poseidon punished him by making his wife Pasiphae fall into uncontrollable lust with the bull. She convinced an Athenian inventor to create a hollow wooden bull for her to hide in, kind of like a Trojan horse, that could facilitate a union. Yeah. Like a union. You get what I mean by that, yeah. She then later gave birth to the one, the only, the Minotaur, which would later plague King Minos and all that fun stuff. You know, like the whole labyrinth thing, yeah. That story. Weird. Don't understand it. But here it is. Number 9, Arachne. You'd think if someone was really good at something, they should be rewarded. But no, oh no, that's not how the ancient gods worked. Their egos were very fragile. Sorry, okay, chill out. Anyways, Arachne was a girl who was an incredibly talented seamstress, which made her a little bit cocky. One day she was so proud of her work that she proclaimed that she was a better weaver than Athena. Athena was the goddess of wisdom and war, so not a good person to mess with. Athena warned her not to make such claims, but she ignored her, so the two faced off. The two had a weaving contest in which Arachne ended up winning in front of all of the onlookers, but Athena didn't accept defeat gracefully, and instead of rewarding her, punished Arachne to feel immense overwhelming guilt, causing her to take her own life. But that wasn't enough for Athena. The goddess brought her back as a giant spider who would forever weave her designs in the forms of webs. Not very nice. Not very nice indeed. Number 8, Erysichthon. Are rich people rich because they're greedy, or greedy because they're rich? Either way, Erysichthon was, bottom line, a very greedy man with wealth that spilled over. Kind of like the Sun King, really. Planning to build another feast hall for himself because he needed another one, he demanded that a massive grove of trees be cut down to make room. This grove, however, was sacred to Demeter, the goddess of earth, but the men did as he asked, save for one tree. One tree was left standing, covered in beautiful wreaths, symbolizing every prayer she'd ever granted. When the men wouldn't do it, Erysichthon tried to do it himself. While doing so, he killed the dryad who lived in the tree, which really didn't bode well with the goddess. To suit his greed, she set down Lemos, the divine representation of starvation. Overwhelmed by a formidable hunger, the more he ate, the more he desired. He sold off his entire fortune, including his own daughter, to buy more and more food, but nothing would slake his hunger. Finally, he began eating himself, bit by bit, until he finally perished in his own greed, destitute, and alone. So, moral of the story is don't cut down trees. Or don't be greedy and don't cut down trees. Number 7, Leda and the Swan. Like, Zeus, head of the gods, the one we all should be looking up to, was like questionably immoral. But like, I mean, when you're a god, you can kind of do what you want. This story hurts my head because I just, like, how does A get to B? Anyways, Leda was the daughter of the king of Pleuron in Aetolia and wife to Tyndaris. One day she wandered by the river Eurotas and Zeus fell hard for this bathing beauty, but he just couldn't show up in his true form because 1, Hera, his wife and sister, was watching, and 2, she probably would explode if she saw his true form. So he went to Aphrodite to ask what to do, and she transformed him into an immaculate swan. By either seduction or nefarious action, there's 2 sides to the story. Some say her, and others say that she was into it. I don't know. Leda became pregnant either way and gave birth to 2 eggs. Eggs! Inside the eggs were 2 sets of twins. One, the infamous Helen of Troy and Polydeuces, and the other 2 were born from Leda's husband, Clytemnestra and Castor. One pair was immortal and the other mortal, which is also still confusing because, like, didn't Helen of Troy die? I don't know. There was also another version which is pretty much the same tale, except it was the goddess Nemesis, not Leda, and Zeus turned into a beaver, and it was just really weird. So again, confusing. No idea what's going on. Number 6, Kronos. I like how the Greek gods are as like chaotic to how the world is in Greek mythology. It kind of makes a weird sort of sense, you know? This weird godly family was messed up from the very beginning, and if you don't know the original story of Kronos, then, well, here you go. Before the gods of Olympus, before Zeus and Hera, there were the elder gods Gaia and Uranus, and then their son Kronos, who married Rhea. Kronos overthrew his father, and when he heard that one of his children was going to do the same thing, he decided to eat them. All of them. Just gobbled them down like an aspirin. Rhea wasn't a huge fan of the whole thing, and eventually enough was enough. So when Kronos went to swallow Zeus, Rhea tricked him and gave him a rock instead. She stole Zeus and hid him away until the day he would be strong enough to return and overtake his father. Disguised as a cupbearer, he gave his father a purgative which made him puke up all of his siblings. Together they stormed against their father and overthrew him after 10 years in battle. Whew, that's a rough start to family life. And then Zeus married his sister, and there was a whole bunch of incest. It's just, you know what I mean. You've heard that. Number 5, Horus and Set. Speaking of Horus, earlier, remember how I said Horus had to take over defending his father? Well, here is where this story begins. When Horus grew up to be a man, he pulled a Hamlet. He was like, "You killed my father, prepare to die." Thus a series of battles ensued, and one of the gods didn't play fair. Set kept cheating at everything and continued to come out as victor. Not surprising, since he didn't earn his way on the throne, he killed for it, kind of like a certain Claudius. Eventually Isis stepped out to help her son/nephew overcome her brother. She set a trap for Set, but after some pitiless begging for his own life, she let him go. Horus was pissed, so angry some of the other gods got upset that he was so angry. They agreed to compete in a final boat race, and Horus was like crushing it. He was doing really well, he was about to win, but then of course Set cheated by turning into a hippopotamus and attacked the boat, therefore claiming victory once again. Osiris finally showed up and declared that no man should take the throne through murder. So Horus took the throne. Why Osiris didn't just settle the whole deal from the beginning is confusing in itself, but hey, kinda reminded me of the eagles that showed at the end of Lord of the Rings that could have saved like 3 movies, you know? Kinda like that. Anyways, let's move on. Number 4, Ra and his boat. Ra is one of the most revered gods in Egyptian mythology, especially since he was the god of the sun. He was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon. That kind of makes sense. He was once the greatest of all gods, but had to take a step back after he got too old and tired, and especially considering his task, I can see why. His job was to drive away darkness and sail across the skies, delivering light wherever he went. But at night, he would dive into the underworld and have to cross 12 gates. 12 hours, an hour per gate. After paying his respect to Osiris every night, a giant snake named Apophis tried to attack and swallow the boat. Every night! Poor guy, no wonder he got worn out. Every day it got harder to defend, and even one night, Apophis succeeded, but could only hold the sunlight for so long. She threw it up, which explained solar eclipses. After Set was cast out after the whole nephew battle, he ended up serving Ra in his boat and kept the snake at bay, but there's something confusing coming later that I think you'll agree is very confusing, so here we go. Coming up next, we have Bast, number 3. Have you ever had a cat look you up and down and kind of like expect something, like worship? You know? Are you a cat person? Dog person? Let me know in the comments. Well, that's because cats were a big deal in Egyptian mythology. They even had their own goddess. Bastet was a cat goddess depicted as a woman with a cat's head. Cats had a meaningful role in ancient Egypt as they protected their food from rats and snakes. They were even seen as family members, and to harm one was punishable by death. Legend says that sometimes cats would enter burning buildings to save their families. If they died, the goddess would bring them back to life, hence the idea of cats having 9 lives. There it is. Now here's where things get confusing. You know that story I told about Ra? Well, apparently Bastet was in the boat with him as well. During the day she would ride with him, and at night she would turn into a cat and then defend the boat from Apophis the snake. But I thought that was Set. So many conflicting things. I saw like a couple different stories who said each thing was different, so who knows. Number 2, Jeb and Nut. Yet another sibling partnership. We have Jeb and Nut. They fell deeply in love and could never be separated. They were that couple who would like constantly be like, oh my god, stop, right next to each other at dinner, you know what I mean? Jeb was the god of the earth and Nut was the god of the sky. A previously mentioned god, Atum, found their union inappropriate, so he pushed Nut into the sky far away from Jeb. He just didn't like being a third wheel. Jeb and Nut were close enough to see each other, but could never hold each other again. And she gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Some say Horus too, but I don't think that's true. Number 1, the treasure thief. Okay, I don't know how I feel about this story, okay? This doesn't really feel like harmony is in balance, but anyways. The treasure thief ends in a way I really didn't expect, and I'm not sure you will either. Long ago, a great pharaoh with a wealth of riches decided to build a pyramid in which to keep them safe. One of the builders was wise to his plan and decided to find a way to claim them for himself. He built a stone vault with a hidden entrance covered by a slab so he could get to the riches, but unfortunately he fell ill before he could return, so he told his sons of his plan. The sons headed to the pyramid in the dead of night, following their father's order, but unbeknownst to them, the pharaoh had laid booby traps and one brother was caught in one. Not wanting to be found or interrogated, revealing his other brother, he told his brother to chop his head off. Ugh, that he did. Loyalty? I don't know. The pharaoh, upon finding the body, hung it up in the town square in the hopes of like weeding out whoever it belonged to. But the other brother, being so clever, got the guards drunk and stole back his brother's body in the dead of night. The pharaoh was like, I'm not even mad, I'm just impressed. He gave the thief a pardon, summoned him to the square, and gave his daughter to marry him. Yeah dude, you tried to steal my jewels? Don't worry about it. Have my daughter, because you're so talented at your job. Great work.
Number 10, Ragnarok. I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. Yes, the end of times. It's all over. So long as I'm here for your entertainment, everything is going to be okay. Ragnarok is the prediction of end times. All ancient civilizations did this. Maybe we just like talking about it. Maybe we just like thinking we're all doomed. Maybe we're just all a little emo. Who knows? I don't know. Ragnarok is slightly different from other world-ending predictions, as instead of one event, it's a series of events that signals the beginning of the end times. As a gamer, it was kind of like watching Call of Duty fall off. Things were great in Black Ops 2. Things were good. Lots of good maps, fun weapons, perks. It was great. But then they added jetpacks, and you knew it was the beginning of the end. A good thing we never get close to that in real life though, right? Everything's fine. It's good right now, it's good. Number 9, Boulder. If you know your myths and your ancient stories, then you know that there's some stories that are very different from culture to culture. However, there's also a lot of similarities. The story of Balder is both. Very similar to Achilles, that is. A dude has been given the gift of invulnerability. I am invincible. Pretty sick. Achilles had a weakness. It was his heel. And Balder, well, it was a mistletoe. Every guy has his weakness, but yeah, it was a mistletoe. And Loki made a dart out of it, and then the dart got thrown at him, and then everyone was sad. It was kind of a mess, and yada yada. I'm sure this won't have any effect on our world. Why is the ground shaking? Number 8, Loki. Lord of the Tricks, the god of mischief. Everyone knows who Loki is, most likely due to some very successful superhero movies in the last few years, but the same may know him regardless. Known for many tricks and evil deeds, his best trick, or whatever you want to call it, was his shape-shifting. Loki has the ability to transform into any creature and any gender, and for the people who don't have the ability to see through these tricks, it often leads to a lot of misfortune, like previously mentioned with Baldur. The dude was up to a lot of bad stuff. Bad stuff. Now he's a superhero, or supervillain actually. Number 7, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the immense and central anchor that is the Norse worlds, surrounded by the 9 worlds, that is, where the gods often meet to talk about god stuff, which is really important, deliberating and all that fun stuff. The tree shares a connection with that of trees in Germanic paganism, culturally speaking, at least. I mean, come on, you can't blame them. There is something powerful about a large stoic tree that has connections and ties to all the realms. It's almost like they knew how important trees were all the way back then. Kind of needed them to breathe, and for a guy with asthma, that's that's pretty important. I gotta breathe. Dude, I go up a flight of stairs and I'm just I don't even smoke either. Number 6, Thor's hammer. Probably the most recognizable piece of Norse mythology is Thor's thick and heavy hammer. Yes, that was an innuendo. It's a big one. Loki had been getting up to no good, as per usual, no surprise there, and decided to play some more tricks. These tricks got him into some trouble, so he then thought he'd make it up by playing more tricks on the master smiths, the dwarves. Not really a good thought process there. A competition was put in place to see who could make the best gifts for the gods. After a lot of gold and a boat that would fit in your pocket, everyone else was kind of just feeling meh, nothing special. However, that was until the reveal of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Nice. That had the crowds oohing and awing. A hammer that would never shatter, always hit its mark, and return to Thor when thrown. Now that's a pretty good hammer.
Number 5, Circe and the pigs. Circe wasn't so much considered as much a goddess, though she was one, more like a witch or an enchantress. She was the daughter of Helios, and depending on your sources, she was also the daughter of Hecate. This story is confusing because no one can really define whether she was the villain of the story or just like sad and lonely. The story goes as follows. The great hero Odysseus and his crew, after months at sea, happen upon her island. He sends his men ashore to investigate and find a cottage surrounded by magnificent yet docile beasts. Circe is heard singing, and when the men greet her, she invites them in for a hearty meal, and after months at sea, that's amazing. Unbeknownst to them though, the food is enchanted and the men all turn into pigs. Odysseus discovers this, and after Hermes places a protective charm on him, he confronts her. Her charms were powerless on him because of Hermes, so she invited him into bed instead. Yeah, sure, why not? This is also out of character for Odysseus because he was super in love with his wife back home, but I guess he couldn't say no because she was a goddess, and hey, sexy times. Circe realizes who he was, and having been foretold that Odysseus would be the only man to resist her, she lifted the curse on the men. She also made them hotter in the process, as a like, I'm really sorry. And then they all stayed for a year because I guess why not? They just stayed for a year. I don't know why. When they decided to finally leave, Circe ended up giving him a bunch of info to protect him, so I guess like she turned into a friend after all. And yeah, it's just weird. Why would you stay on an island that turned you into pigs? I don't know, do you? Number 4, Hercules holds a giant off the ground. The taller you stand, the farther you have to fall. A lesson the tall people of the world will understand. As a requirement for the 12 trials of Hercules, our great hero had to defeat a massive giant. This ginormous form was named Antaeus, an undefeatable immortal so long as his feet remained on the ground. His mother was Gaia, the goddess of the earth, so like all his powers came from her. Duh. Antaeus was a big fan of wrestling, he loved it, and Hercules was a big strong guy, so they went at it. But in order to defeat him, all Hercules had to do was lift him off the ground and wait until his power drained from him, and that was that, because if he threw him on the ground, he would just like regenerate. So that sounds more like a prolonged piggyback than wrestling, but you know, whatever gets the job done. Good for you, buddy. And coming up to our top 3, we have number 3, Procrustes. Theseus dealt with a lot of interesting characters, and Procrustes was exactly how his name sounds. crusty. If you ever find yourself wrapped up in a scheme designed to enforce uniformity by violent methods, then you may use the term Procrustean bed to adequately describe it. Procrustes was a serial taker of lives who had a very special bed. He would, like Skyron, soothe very weary travelers into a false sense of security by offering them a bed to stay for in the night. However, if you didn't fit on the bed, which no one did, he would either violently stretch you or trim you, to put it delicately, so that you would fit the bed. Obviously, all the travelers ended up dead. The notorious criminal lived between Athens and Ulysses, so coming across travelers was pretty easy. It was just a matter of time before Theseus would encounter him and set the record straight. Having heard of his crimes, Theseus decided to turn the tables and make Procrustes fit his own bed. So, what's even more confusing about this story is that Procrustes was the son of Poseidon, and so technically was Theseus' brother, so in a way, Theseus kinda committed fratricide, but Procrustes wasn't really behaving with godlike intentions, so I'm not sure where you can draw the line there. Number 2, Tantalus and Pelops. This one. Considering Tantalus was in such good rapport with the gods, I'm not sure why he did this. As we know, being on the gods' bad side even slightly leads to some pretty harsh punishment, so imagine really being on their bad side. Tantalus was the king of the land that is now Turkey today, and the gods thought he was just swell. So great, they'd even visit him from time to time for dinner. That sounds pretty good, man. Maybe they were awful dinner guests or something, but eventually Tantalus wanted to see how far he could push his luck. He devised a test that would determine whether the gods were all-knowing. He could have been like, how many fingers do I have behind my back? He could have been like, how many apples are in my dungeon? He could have done something random like that, but instead he did the last thing you would think of. Tantalus killed his son Pelops, cooked him up and served him for dinner. Of course, the gods were wise to it as soon as they sat down, and considering a father eating his children was a pretty sensitive topic, Kronos, they were not pleased. The only god who ate some of Pelops was Demeter, who was blinded by grief over the loss of her daughter Persephone because she was downstairs with Hades. Needless to say, they were pissed. Zeus threw Tantalus into the abyss of Tartarus to endure an eternity of torment. His punishment was to spend the rest of time waist deep in water with a fruit tree hanging above him. Each time he went to take a drink, the water receded, and every time he went to take a bite of the fruit, the wind would blow it off course. However, as soon as he stopped lunging for it, everything would return back to normal and tempt him even further. Happy ending for Pelops though, since Demeter ate part of him, they brought him back to life, and he was turned into ivory. Pretty good. Pretty good for him. Number 1, Endymion. This story isn't exactly linear, so it remains one of the most confusing tales because it was likely pieced together. The issue for historians is that no complete story exists of it today, but we know it's about the love between the goddess of the moon, Selene, and a human man. In some versions he was the son of Thelius, others say he was raised by him, but was actually the son of Zeus. Some say he was a shepherd, others a king, but either way, this guy spent a lot of time outside at night beneath the moon. Sometimes he would even stay up all night charting the path of the moon, ignoring the desire to sleep. Soon Selene fell deeply in love with Endymion, a strikingly handsome mortal man. Selene could no longer ignore her desire and decided to visit her love, abandoning the sky altogether. Softly, gently, she crept up upon him to avoid frightening him, but the two were swept away by the throes of love, but her adoration distracted her from her duties. In addition to that, Endymion was mortal, meaning their love would be short-lived in his mortal life. So Zeus, either for punishment or pity of Selene, put her lover into a deep, frozen sleep so that she may always see her love as a young man. But little more is known actually if that was punishment or pity. But hey, it's kind of beautiful.
Starting our list off at number 10, the disappearance of the Norse. Norse mythology is fascinating yet mysterious, of course. They settled in Greenland around 1000 AD, and they settled for over 400 years, and then just like that, they disappeared. But not without leaving their mark first. Vikings invented hockey, they skied, women had a large amount of rights compared to what we usually see on this channel, right? That's a given. But one of life's greatest mysteries Valkyries is where Greenland's Vikings went. Like I said, they disappeared, right? The only remains that are left are crumbling church walls that were used for not even 500 years. This is baffling. Archaeologists are still unsure of what happened to the Norse population. Maybe it was a plague, maybe it was the Inuit, or perhaps they settled back in Europe. Again, it's really hard to tell. Recent excavations provide hints that they settled in the West, most likely relying on trade to survive. So maybe they followed the goods and then they left naturally. Who knows? They used to call hockey Nataliker. That's all I know personally. So
in our number 9 spot today, we have the creation myth. Going right back to the beginning of things, the Norse believed that the universe emerged from an empty space separating the world of ice and fire. The first creature to come into being in the Norse creation myth was the giant called Ymir. He is said to have been born from the moment the fire from Muspelheim and the ice from Niflheim met in the abyss of Gunnin-Gaga. Ymir had the ability to conceive asexually, and his offspring spontaneously sprang from his armpit sweat and his legs. This is how Ymir became the mother and father of the Jotuns, who would later go on to become the enemies of the Norse gods. But eventually, Buri came into existence. Buri went on to have the grandchildren Vili, Ve, and Odin, we all know Odin, who decided to create the world and fill it with life. But unlike the Christian ideals and concept, the Norse deities couldn't just create life out of nothing. So naturally, they just killed Ymir and made the world out of his body. The sky was made from his skull, his brains became the clouds, his blood turned into the oceans, and his teeth were mountains and rocks. This gave even more power to the three brothers, who then gave life and intelligence to humans. This creation story is thought to have really influenced the way that the Norse saw the world. They were living in a universe that was only made possible by death.
Number 8. Norse or Viking? You may have asked yourself during this video already, or at some point in your life, what is the difference between Norse and Viking? I watched Norsemen and now I want to bark at dogs. That's my new dream job, just to bark at people all day, I guess. Norse and Viking both referred to the same group of people who both settled in Scandinavia in the medieval times. Now this all happened again around 1000 AD. The Norse are Norsemen, right? Guys who bark at dogs, you know, all that kind of stuff. The Vikings are also Norsemen, but they're just a little younger and a bit more, a bit more energetic. A lot of this, a lot of this. A lot of height, you know what I mean? The Vikings were seafaring warriors, while the Norsemen were involved in farming and trade and that sort of stuff. So there you go. Now you know the difference.
In our number 7 spot today, we have golden apples. Golden apples are an incredibly important part of Norse mythology because of the fact that they need to be continually eaten by the Norse gods in order to maintain their immortality. It's not just like a free ticket, alright? They gotta consume a lot of golden apples. The apples also supplied the gods with their strength, as well as their forever youth. The orchard that contained these apples was looked over by the goddess of spring, Idun. I don't know how to say that, so I just went for it. The apples are extremely important to the mythology, and in one story, when the goddess gets tricked into giving herself and the apples over to Loki, the gods immediately grew old and weak, but luckily she was returned and everyone's youth was restored. This led people to search for these golden apples at one point, like real humans. But even if they were to find one of these magic apples, you'd need a constant supply in order to maintain your immortality, and that might be more difficult than you think.
Number 6. Viking funerals. I really wish we still did Viking funerals. You know, every funeral I've been to in the last 5 years, it's all been a snooze fest. I'm like, yeah, they're old, we get it. Josh Groban, sure, let's change it up a bit. Where are all the horns? Where are all the flames? I want to feel like I'm at a Greta Van Fleet concert, right? Viking funerals came in many different shapes and sizes. Sometimes they would bury the body and leave stone circles around the graves. That's pretty badass. Or sometimes they would do burial mounds. That's also pretty badass. Vikings were pagans, so they believed that the more smoke during a cremation, the better, seeing as smoke was their way of reaching the afterlife. And in Norse mythology, boats symbolized safe passage to the afterlife, so Vikings would shape these stones placed around the graves. They would shape them like a vessel, or these mounds would be shaped like giant boats of some sort, which is again pretty epic. Beats Josh Groban every time. But high-ranking Norsemen, that's where the fun comes into funeral. High-ranking Norsemen would be buried with their actual real-life vessels. Yeah, they'd be buried with their ship. Imagine that for a visitation. You'd be like, oh my god, how do I even get in? In 834 AD, the Oseberg ship burial honored 2 women. The ship vessel was 70 feet long and 17 feet wide. 15 oars on each side. It was massive. It was discovered in Norway on a farm. So again, the whole shooting an arrow while they're at sea thing, it wasn't actually that common, as badass as it is. Because if you missed, well, you just gave away the Oseberg and you also botched the funeral. All in one So, way to go.
At number 5, atomic tourism. If you could do anything or go anywhere while on vacation, what would you do? Maybe go on a cruise or visit a tropical destination, but how about go and watch bombs get tested? Well, if you were around in the 1950s, then atomic tourism might have been one of your options for entertainment while on vacation. In the 50s, the US was expanding its arsenal of nuclear weapons due to the threat of the Soviet Union and their nuclear firepower. Because this was such a big thing, the Tourist Bureau of Las Vegas decided to profit off the US military's weapons testing and make an entire attraction out of it. Because testing for these nuclear weapons took place in the desert in Nevada, a tourist site was set up a safe distance away so that people could watch these weapons be detonated, as well as have a beautiful view of the Nevada horizon. People would bring picnics to watch the nuclear weapons, and at nighttime they would throw parties while they waited for the next explosion. It's such a weird tourist attraction, but then again, the 1950s were also a weird time anyway.
Number 4. Agent 355. So they are actually making a movie inspired by this one because of course it would make a great movie. Move over 007, there is a new agent in town and I smell an excellent film legacy brewing. After a hasty retreat made by George Washington leaving more control in British hands, he needed to come up with a stealthier way to retaliate. Thus, the Culper spy ring was born. This intelligence operation was so good at keeping secrets, some of the identities of the spies were never revealed, especially the identity of Agent 355. Not even Washington himself knew who was working for him or who was 355, but we do know that they were a female agent, a spy of expert skill. It was because of her that the head of England's intelligence, Major John Andre, was arrested. Notoriously handsome and debonair, 355 could have been any of the women that fawned over him at parties, gathering his secrets. One secret in particular was his plan to sell West Point to the British. After documents pertaining to his ordeal was uncovered, he was arrested and condemned. But as to who would be directly thanked for this capture was unknown. The only other suspected fact about her was that a female spy was reportedly killed on a prison ship in 1780. Of course, there are theories regarding her real identity, but Agent 355 was so good at her job that who she was and what else she did would be taken to her grave.
At number 3, Chrysippus. You know how when you laugh really hard, you start gasping for air and your stomach starts to hurt from tensing up your body so much? Well, this once killed someone. A Greek philosopher named Chrysippus actually died from laughter. In the 3rd century BCE, the philosopher laughed so hard because he saw his donkey eating figs, and then he kicked the bucket, so to speak. According to science, death by laughter can occur because of asphyxiation, because you just can't breathe because you're laughing so hard, or through an aneurysm because of the tension from laughing. What's so wild about this is the fact that this wasn't the first time in history that death by laughter has happened. It is said that Cleopatra's father died the same way because he was laughing at the death of her husband, and a 5th century Greek painter met the same fate because he laughed too hard at one of his own paintings. And a Danish audiologist passed away in a similar fashion in 1989 because he saw a funny scene in a movie that raised his heart rate so much that he died.
Number 2, the first marathon. The Battle of Marathon is one of the most famous Greek battles in history, and it's also epic, and I also can't believe it happened because it's so cool. Back in 490 BC, the Greeks faced off against the invading Persians on the plains of Marathon. It was a victory that would go down in history as a testament to courage and excellence. But it wasn't only the battle itself, but a man named Phidippes whose actions were so insane, some people think it was a myth. He was sent to enlist the help of Spartans before the battle, so he ran to Sparta but stopped in Athens first. The total distance was 240 kilometers, like there and back. I can barely make 4 kilometers, imagine 240 kilometers on foot. He wasn't just like a basic guy though, he was what was called a hemerodromos, a sacred day-long runner in the military. They were known for covering incredible distances by foot, even foregoing sleep. They would most likely have consumed figs and cured meat, like that's it. His journey inspired the marathons run today, and even some have tried to make the exact trek he did. Meanwhile, it's a struggle for me to even do like a half-hour workout at the end of the day.
And finally, at number 1, Robert Liston. Robert Liston was probably the worst doctor in the history of medicine because he messed up so bad it is unbelievable. This surgeon in the 1800s performed a surgery that had a 300% mortality rate. So he went in to help someone and ended up killing 3 people as a result. Liston was performing a simple leg amputation, but was working so fast that he ended up cutting off 2 of his assistant's fingers during the procedure. Both the assistant and and the patient ended up passing away after contracting gangrene. Now you're probably asking yourself, well, what about the third person? You said this had a 300% mortality rate. Well, let me tell you how the third person perished. During the procedure, Liston swiped near an elderly doctor with one of his blades. Thinking that he had been cut, the doctor started freaking out and went into shock. The stress was so much that the doctor ended up having a heart attack and passed away. So in the end, Robert Liston killed 3 people trying to save 1 life and failed miserably.
Number 10, Hathor. The goddess Hathor was originally created by her dad, Ra, as a destroyer of men. She was supposed to punish all those who were disobedient to him. But then Ra was like, nah, I don't really like that idea. He just kind of changed his mind and decided to make her the exact opposite. Instead, the goddess of love. But she kind of loved killing men, and like even he couldn't stop her. So one night he gave her what was supposed to be a mug of ale, but actually made it like a special kind of blood, and she got so drunk off of it that she got too tired out to kill anymore and therefore became the goddess of love. Drunk in love, am I right? Her cult was centered in Dendera, where she was also seen as the goddess of fertility and childbirth. When the Greeks occupied Egypt, they compared her with the goddess Aphrodite. But unlike the voluptuous woman Aphrodite was depicted as, Hathor came in 3 forms, and I bet you can't guess which. She was depicted as either a woman with a cow's ears, wearing the headdress of a cow, or just a cow. Moo. Number 9, the beginning of the world. Yeah, what an inventive way to imagine the beginning of things. I mean, the Big Bang is still pretty crazy too, but hey, here we go. Freaking love how much magic is in these stories. Like, I'm in, because that's all there was at the beginning of the universe according to the ancient Egyptians. Just swirling darkness, chaos, and magic. Heka, the god of magic, was the only thing that existed, waiting for the opportune moment to begin. Then a hill showed up called Ben Ben, and out of which the god Atum erupted from. He was lonely, so he mated with his own shadow to give birth to 2 children, Shu and Tefnut. Shu gave life, Tefnut gave order. They left their father to build the world, but they were gone so long he took out his eye and sent it to search for them. In the meantime, he just kinda sat there contemplating eternity all alone. He was really sad. This guy sounds like Zeus mixed with Eeyore. Anyways, his kids came back and he was so happy he wept tears of joy, and out of which were born men and women. They also brought his eye back, so that was nice. Number 8, light as a feather. So unlike a lot of religions we've heard of, there wasn't really a concept of hell in Egyptian mythology. It was either you were worthy of heading into the afterlife or you weren't. Mat was the goddess of harmony and supported the belief that if harmony was disrupted, it must be restored. Every ancient Egyptian myth in some form follows this format. But the most important role she played was in the afterlife. When the soul left the body, it would appear in the Hall of Truth in order to stand judgment before Osiris. The heart would be weighed on a golden scale against Mat's white feather. If the heart was heavier, it would be devoured by a monster and the soul would disappear. If it was lighter, then you could go live in eternal bliss. So instead of several layers of burning torment, souls in Egypt instead faced eternal darkness and unconsciousness. The idea of non-existence was more terrifying than being cut up by demons. Number 7, Osiris and Isis. Okay, so we aren't strangers to deities being a fan of incest. It was kind of like how they multiplied, and ancient Greeks were okay with it, kind of, but they kind of weren't. Anyways, the Egyptian gods were no exception. Isis and Osiris were 2 of the 4 children of the goddess of Nut. Isis and Osiris were married and actually really in love. They dug each other. When Osiris rose to the throne as the eldest sibling, his brother Set was pretty jealous. So he took the life of his own brother, cut him into little pieces, and scattered them all over Egypt. He really wanted to make sure the guy was dead. But then Isis wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. She had great magical powers capable of restoring life. She collected all of the pieces of her brother/husband and breathed life back into him. Osiris returned to life and they made all the love and then soon conceived a child named Horus. However, Osiris couldn't return to the land of the living, so he had to stay and rule over the underworld. So his son Horus was left to get revenge, and we'll get to that later. Number 6, Anubis. Now, I think in Western films that depict ancient Egypt, like The Mummy Returns, the god Anubis is often associated with the underworld. You know, that creepy half-man, half-jackal creature who appears to walk out of your nightmares? Like, He's so creepy. Well, he did used to run the underworld until Osiris took over, but he was actually the god of mummification and the afterlife. So not wrong, but not the whole story. Anubis was the son of Nephthys and Set. Well, kind of. Nephthys actually never conceived the child with Set. She kind of had the hots for Osiris, so she disguised herself as Isis and made love to him that way, and then Anubis came to life. That may have been one of the reasons Seth attacked Osiris in the first place, as his suspicions rose. But it was actually Anubis who helped Isis piece together Osiris, creating the first mummy. Fun fact, during the Greek rule of Egypt, Anubis and Hermes were seen kind of as the same, the people who ferried the dead to the underworld. Oh, sorry, and a point. Anubis was actually the one who weighed people's hearts, so he used the feather, the thing, you know what to do. He was responsible for doing that. Number 5, Sir Adrian Cotton de Walt. Love that name. There are going to be a couple unbelievable events on this list from World War II, so just a heads up. But truth be told, the war itself is kind of hard to believe. Sir Adrian Cotton de Wart was not only a man who survived the impossible once, but he made a career out of it. He wasn't like your Blackadder general in the back with a pipe. This dude was on the front lines tossing grenades with one arm because he already lost the other. He served in the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. He survived being shot in the face, skull, hip, leg, ankle, and ear. One eye and one arm short, this enthusiastic war hero dove into the bloodshed again and again. He was seen pulling pins out of grenades and throwing them with his one good arm during Battle of the Somme. But even as a 60-year-old man, he was still a beast. His plane got shot down in April 1941, he crashed it into the Mediterranean, survived, swam all the way to shore, then he got captured by Italian soldiers, thrown into a POW camp, then he escaped, eluded capture for 8 days, but unfortunately the lack of Italian looks gave him away. He was released 2 years later, and Churchill was such a big fan of him, he made him his rep over in China. He ended up passing away peacefully at age 83. Despite hundreds of close calls with death. Number 4, Simo Heha. This is actually kind of a plug for a short film I'm looking to raise funds for. Check out my Instagram to learn more. But his story is incredible and it's so unbelievable. Simo Heha's story sounds like something straight out of a movie, except it actually happened. A humble Finnish farmer who became the Soviets' nightmare in World War II. He is widely regarded as one of the most accomplished and skilled snipers in history. The Winter War began in Finland in 1939 after Russia decided that it was time to regain some territory. They thought it was going to be easy. But soon they came to fear the man who would be known as the White Death. He was trained as a sniper at a young age, didn't want to take human lives though, so he just became a farmer, but the lives of his countrymen were at stake. The Winter War lasted just over 100 days, and within that time, Simo hit as many as 500 men, his personal best being 40 confirmed hits in one day. Some people estimate that it was over 800 people. In March 1940, he was hit in the jaw by a counter sniper, leaving him in a coma for 11 days. But when he awoke, however, the Russians surrendered. That is poetic justice. Number 3, Alexander the Great. How did this guy exist? Was he the son of Zeus? The case is so convincing that even Alexander believed it himself. During the 15 years of his conquest, starting from his first victory when he was 18, Alexander never lost a battle. He was so prolific in battle that his strategies are still studied to this day. Before Alexander entered Egypt, they had been under Persian rule for just over 200 years. Through his incredible prowess and lightning-quick decision-making, Alexander defeated them. Egypt was so happy they even claimed him as their pharaoh. While he was in Egypt, however, Alexander decided to make the long trek to visit the shrine of Zeus Ammon. According to the man himself, he was guided there by ravens, and it even rained during his journey, which was interpreted as a blessing. When he got there, the priest named him a son of Zeus. Now, if that doesn't make this guy sound like a myth, then I don't know what will. Number 2, Boadicea. Boadicea is the Morrigan in my mind. She is Xena, warrior princess. This woman was so ferocious, she was called the scourge of the Roman Empire. Yeah, that's right, this queen took on the Roman Empire. At the time Rome was invading the south of Britain, Queen Boadicea ruled the Iceni tribe of East Anglia, along her husband King Prasutagus. Though her early days remain mostly a mystery, she remains among the canon of heroes who defended the British Isles. She was fearsome to behold, with flaming red hair and a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. She and her husband fought against the Romans until his death, after which the Romans drove straight to take her on. They attacked her daughters publicly, which, like, Mother Bear, not a good idea, after which she toured in a chariot rallying the people in rebellion. She sacked 3 Roman cities and took no prisoners. She annihilated the 9th Legion when she took out their entire relief force. Sadly though, Boadicea fell after a vicious battle, but her name echoes in the halls of heroes. And last but not least, Richard, Saladin, and the Third Crusade. Just the Crusades in general are just unbelievable. Never in history have 2 rulers been so equally matched. Currently I'm reading Warriors of God, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin and the Third Crusade by James Reston, and the fact that everything I've read so far, like, isn't just the next Game of Thrones novel astounds me. These 2 never met because Saladin believed that kings should not go to war if they had met, but because they were fighting over the Holy Land, war was kind of inevitable. But while Saladin did not engage in warfare, Richard dove right in the middle of everything. They both had such incredible admiration for each other that in the middle of battles, they would send each other gifts. Like, I don't understand. You killed my men. You killed my men. Here's a fruit basket. Literally happened. And another example, during the Battle of Jaffa, Richard's horse ended up being killed, and Saladin was so impressed with him that he sent him 2 new ones. 2! On top of that, Richard had taken off half of his armor before he had leapt ashore to fight. So he was, like, basically, like, half naked. Eventually Saladin tried to have him assassinated, but Richard was so ferocious in battle that everyone feared him. The dude was pretty much a human bulldozer. The 2 assassins ended up waking up the camp because they were fighting about who should take the guy out. Guys, please vote for a video about the Crusades because they were freaking wild and I don't understand them. Number 10. Dionysus, man. Dionysus was like never a dull moment. He literally exploded into existence after his mother Semele burst into pieces when Zeus showed her his true form because he was tricked by Hera as a whole thing. Then Zeus continued the gestation period by carrying him in his thigh. Ever since then, he took on the responsibility of being god of fertility, wine, winemaking, and madness. So essentially the party god, the frat boy of Olympus. However, some say that Dionysus was a result of a union between Zeus and Persephone, which is like even more confusing, but hey. It's a myth, so let's go. But the most famous story about him revolves around the Bacchae and the story interpreted by Euripides. Pentheus, the king of Thebes, banished the worship of Dionysus and forbade the women of the kingdom from participating in the Bacchus. You can bet frat boy wasn't happy about this, he doesn't like being banned. He cast a spell of madness on all the women of the kingdom to attend the festival. So Pentheus caught him somehow and imprisoned him, but you can't chain a god. Dionysus decided on his revenge. He transformed into an irresistibly beautiful woman and lured Pentheus to spy on the Bacchic rituals. When the Maenads spotted him, they thought he was a wild dog. Peeping Tom, more like. So they tore him limb from limb. One of the attackers was his mother, Agave, who didn't know the animal was actually her son in the madness that she was wrapped up in. So yeah, there are plenty more stories regarding this rascal, but this will have to wait for part 3. Number 9, Lycurgus. We talked about Mira in part 1, you know, the woman who slept with her father and then turned into a tree from which she gave birth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch part 1 right now. Yeah, weird times. Well, here is another plant story that's equally as confusing. I know branches can sometimes look like arms, but how do you confuse your son for one? Well, Dionysus has to be involved. Lycurgus attacked and injured the aforementioned party god, Dionysus, and needless to say, the gods were not happy about it. Dionysus was basically doing a pub crawl with wine in the mortal realm, and Lycurgus wasn't jazzed about it because he was a messy dude. As punishment, Dionysus descended upon him with madness. In this violent state, Lycurgus saw a pile of weeds that he just had to get out of his garden, so he took an axe and chopped them away. Little did he know that it was actually his very own son that he was chopping to pieces. He also took the life of the rest of his family, and he even took off his own legs in his madness. After he finally passed away, he was entombed in a rock as a sign of disrespect for offending the gods. So, moral of the story, don't whine about the man of the vine, who likes to party all the time. Don't do it. Number 8, Hera the Virgin. The most confusing thing in all of Greek mythology was Hera and Zeus's marriage. Sometimes you just gotta know when it's time to call it quits. Between them being siblings, Zeus cheating on her all the time, Hera killing people over jealousy and spite, things were just messy. But did you know that Hera actually grew back her virginity annually? Not at all possible to rebuild that in real life, but if you're a god, then anything is possible. Hera was the goddess of virginity and was worshipped as the goddess of matrimony, virginity, and marriage. Though she was married, albeit unhappily, she was revered as a virgin, which clearly she wasn't. So in order to maintain this, she renewed her virginity every year by bathing in the spring of Canathus. The rites performed in order to do this were kept a secret and never spoken of, but she did it. This meant that people could still revere her for it, and she could pretend for a moment that Zeus and her never got jiggy with it, because obviously she'd want to forget that. After all, being a faithful wife to an unfaithful husband doesn't sound like a grand old time if you ask me. Number 7, Skyron. I don't know about you, but if someone washed my feet for me, the first thing I would do would say, thank you. Full stop. Like, that's it. The last thing I would do is blast them off a cliff with said clean toesies. Already there are a few things I never thought I would say to thousands of people, but what a great intro to the story of Skyron. Skyron was a bandit who was obsessed with killing people after and while they washed his feet. Everybody's got their thing, I guess. He would call travelers on the road to help him wash his feet, which a surprising amount of people agreed to do, right? Imagine someone asking you to do that today. You just hear a voice pleading from a dark alley to like, please wash my feet, wash my feet. I need someone to wash my feet. Would you go? Serious question. Anyways, when these extremely kind people would offer help, he would kick them in the face and push them over a cliff. Yeah. To add insult to injury, at the base of the cliff was a man-eating tortoise who would eat the remains of the either dead or still alive people. Talk about kicking a man while they're down. He got away with this too many times. Imagine the parents having to warn their kids not to wash random people's feet. Thankfully, Theseus, Poseidon's son, butted in and threw him off the very cliff he so enjoyed in his pastime. I like how the crime fits the punishment here, you know? It's satisfying. I like it. It's good storytelling. Number 6, Tereus, Procne, and Philomela. Okay, this one is probably the most messed up out of all the Greek tales, at least in my book. Trigger warnings galore here, folks. I'll try to be delicate. Tereus was the son of Ares and the king of Thrace. He married Procne, who was the eldest daughter of Pandion, the king of Athens. The two fell fast in love, but the Furies prepared their marriage bed and howled all night over their union. A very, very bad omen. Soon Procne longed for her little sister Philomela to join her, so Tereus went to fetch her from Athens. But as soon as he saw her, he was consumed by lust. Despite promising her father he'd protect her, he stole Philomela away and ravaged her. She promised she'd tell everyone what he did, so in order to stop that from happening, he cut out her tongue. He hid her away and told Procne that she'd been lost at sea and perished. For a year, Philomela snuck cloth from the maid that would care for her and wove a tapestry that told her story. The maid secretly brought the cloth to Procne and she immediately sought out her sister. Fueled by rage, she took her revenge. She stole the life of their own son, Itis, and fed him to Tereus for dinner. When he called for him, Procne revealed her sister and pointed to the stew that the king had finished. Tereus flew into a rage and gave chase, but the two women changed into birds to evade him. Birds. Okay. Procne turned into a swallow, Philomela a nightingale, and Tereus soon followed suit by the ravenous hoopoe bird. Would have thought it would be like a raven or like a hawk, but nope, he got the hoopoe bird. Okay. Number 5, Boba. I love all the legends that circulate sleep paralysis. If you have ever experienced it, you know how terrifying it can be. We know that it is a global phenomenon, as most cultures around the world have lore surrounding it. The one that belongs to Indian mythology is the boba. When people experience sleep paralysis, symptoms often include seeing shadowy figures, you're unable to move, there is pressure on your chest, pretty much having a nightmare while you're awake. The boba is said to be a horrific creature who causes it. Made of shadows, the boba's entity preys on those who sleep on their back. Very specific. So no side sleepers here. It strangles its victims to death while asleep, and it is said to be a paranormal explanation for sleep paralysis. So side sleepers, like me, you're safe. If you sleep on your back, you're in trouble. Number 4, Hiranyakashipu. Is it better to be feared or respected? Respected, obviously, that's what I think, because hopefully no one will be looking to stab you in the back if they're so afraid of you, you know what I mean? So it was only a matter of time for the self-proclaimed king of demons, his words, not anyone else's. Even his own son was like, nah, dad. Even though he wasn't the one who did it, he wanted everyone to believe that he created the universe and that he was uncontrollable. His son was, of course, one of the ones who refused to take his belief. Not a good look for him, so he of course tried to kill his own son. No love when you're the king of demons apparently, but every time he tried to even harm his son, he walked out of it unscathed. The reason? Vishnu was protecting him the entire time. But how would they get rid of his father? Well, because he could not be killed by a human, deva, or animal, Vishnu created a blend of creatures creating something entirely different. It was called Narasimha, and one day at twilight he laid on the king of demons' lap and disemboweled him with his claws. I feel like the king of demons was like, oh look, a kitty thing, oh no, and then died. Number 3, Raktabija. This dude seriously sounds terrifying and I don't know how anybody beat him, but they had to create a whole god to get rid of him. Raktabija wasn't just one demon in Indian mythology, he could simultaneously be hundreds, thousands, millions. If one drop of his blood hit the ground, another Raktabija would form, and worse than that, the creature would actually get more powerful when a new version of himself was formed. It was like a huge narcissistic thing. I'm not sure how that works, especially since he's only a tiny baby part. Like, whoa, I'm so powerful. As you can imagine, he was incredibly difficult to defeat. Every time he spilled blood, it was like, whoa, there's more of you. So the gods combined all of their power and created Kali, the destroyer of demons. A grotesque looking goddess decorated with bloody limbs. You know the one, the lady with the multiple arms dancing about. Yeah, an equally fierce demon to face Raktabija. During their battle, of course, his blood poured onto the ground from his wounds, creating thousands of demons. But instead of letting the blood drop to the floor, Kali pierced him and drank all of the blood so not a single drop would hit the floor. And that was how she destroyed him. Kind of like the OG battle vampire. Number 2, Putana. It takes some guts to take on the dude who was literally born to destroy you, but Putana thought she could do it. Putana was an evil demon who was passionate about taking the lives of the young. Needless to say, not someone you want at a daycare. When baby Krishna was born, it was foretold that he would destroy all the demons. Literally his job. So Putana thought she could take the guy out early. She disguised herself as a beautiful young woman, laced her breast with poison and entered his room. Because of her disguise, nobody thought twice, and so she sat down to feed the babe. But unfortunately for her, she made a huge mistake. Krishna was born to destroy demons, never mind the poison. And as he fed from her, he sucked her life away instead. Putana died in absolute agony, and Krishna assured everyone that he was here to do one thing and one thing only, his job. And last but not least, number 1, Mahishasura. Look, I can understand appreciating the beauty of an animal, but when bestiality is thrown into the mix, we gotta pull the reins on that. I know Zeus from Greek mythology was all about that as well. It just seems to be a thing that gods like to do across the world. It's a global thing. Remember the king of demons? Well, this was another demon king who was the son of the king of demons, but not the one previously mentioned. But anyways, his mother was a buffalo. His father had fallen in love with the beauty of a buffalo and married her. Mahisha means buffalo and Asura means demon in Hindi, therefore buffalo demon. No man on this planet could kill him, and he was a very confident dude. He started a war with the people and won. His power knew no bounds because of course what man could kill him? However, there was a catch. A man couldn't kill him, but a woman could. But what woman could kill someone so strong? So the gods created the goddess Durga, and she waged war on the tyrant, finally fulfilling the prophecy. Boy oh boy, do I love a loophole.
Such as Zeus. I want to eliminate some of the better known names on the list, and this is quite literally all Zeus is known for, aside from the lightning bolts up the ass and the temper tantrums. So since there's a lot to cover with this guy, let's just run through a list of some of his most legendary BS. Roll the tape. First, resenting Prometheus for giving fire to all humans and his willful disobedience, Zeus chained his ass to a mountain rock and then had an eagle come eat out his liver every single night. It would regenerate by the next morning for a rinse and repeat effect. Second, kind enough to invite the human Ixion to Olympus, Zeus was pissed homeboy was digging his wife. To confirm the suspicion, he made a cloud version of his wife, which Ixion somehow impregnated, which is how Centaurus is born. Anyway, Zeus bound Ixion to a big old spinning wheel that was also on fire and forced him to repeat the phrase, repay your benefactor frequently with gentle favors in return for all of eternity. Third up, Lo is born to a king and a nymph and naturally takes up banging Zeus in her free time. Hera, the wife, gets pissed about this, so Zeus makes Lo into a literal cow to hide her. Hera knew he was on some BS and said, "That's mighty fine cow you got there, give it to me for my birthday gift," which he did, but then he snuck the cow Lo away, and in response Hera sent gladflies to always chase and sting Lo forever. But wait, there's more! Zeus's mortal son Tantalus pisses him off by feeding his son to the gods for some reason. Zeus sends Tantalus to the underworld in a pool of water surrounded by fruit branches. If he tried to reach the fruit, it moved away. He tried to drink the water, it drained. So he was left hungry and thirsty forever, tantalized. Get it? Get it? The list of Zeus's pettiness is endless. He truly is the world's most dramatic god. And speaking of drama, Izangi and Izanami not only create the universe, but teach us to let the dead lie. The Shinto creation story begins with Izanagi and Izanami, the ma and pa of the soon-to-come Shinto gods. These two were new parents to the whole universe thing, you know? They had a hard time figuring certain things out, as one would. What is matter? What are we? How do we get this party started? The basics. Well, unsure of how to create order from chaos, they decided to F around and find out by plunging a jewel-encrusted spear into the gulf between heaven and earth. Drops supposedly fall from this spear and those created land, thus environment and life with it. Now in a lush paradise, these two begin popping them out like crazy. Unfortunately, our girl Izanami is burnt to death, giving birth to the fire godchild. Izanagi is devastated, so he visits the land of the dead, ladies never settle, intending to bring her back. He finds her down there and begs her to return, but she denies. Well, once some light shines on her face and he sees that she's now a maggot-riddled, rotten corpse, homeboy changes his tune and books it. Shocked that her husband went from groveling to running away from her, she chases him, but her prick ex seals her in the underworld. In spite, she becomes the goddess of the dead and says she's determined to take 1,000 human lives every day to avenge the shame he inflicted. Like your ex nobody likes, he does the petty thing and decides to one-up her and says 1,500 people will be born every day in return. So be careful who you marry. And how about Ray, who banged one out in the tears of that, created the universe and two gods in one go. Before there was anything, there was Ray, also known as Atum. He existed by himself, surrounded by nothingness, and homeboy was lonely, so he decided to end his solitude and create a pantheon of pals, other gods, alongside a universe and worlds to exist within. So it's from a great jerk that Ray produced this universe and planets, alongside the twin gods Shu and Tefnut. Because of Ray's seed being the origin of the world, male self-pleasure became an act of creation to the ancient Egyptian society. Convinced that their main source of livelihood had come from Atum's seed, they believed it was their duty to keep it alive and, well, flowing. Thus the ceremony we discussed in the top 10 most bizarre traditions from ancient Egypt video, where the pharaoh annually spilled his seed in the Nile. Next is a sultry crocodile-esque goddess. Her name is Malambo. She's believed to be the goddess of rivers and fertility to the Zulus and South Africans alike, supposedly even dissuading many from traveling near water. She's often depicted as a large crocodile-esque creature, but her true form is also a water snake. But it could be a stunningly beautiful and insatiable woman who could seduce any man. Once she was welcome to move into his home, it said all male relatives would soon die. She is said to have the power to give wealth, but equally bring about great misfortune, especially to the men that fall her victim. See, our girl Mamlambo eats the face and brains of her victims, but it's been said if you catch her without injury, she will gift her captors with great riches to set her free. Conspiracies stirring communities about those in the past who might have succeeded. Anyway, Zulu women have been known to keep river snakes as good luck charms for seduction. Another god characterized as an animal is Babi, an Egyptian baboon god. Because you may not know this, but it wasn't just cats they revered and worshipped, but also baboons. They were a huge part of everyday life, working on police forces as well as being companions. They were respected and integral to Egyptian society. Babi was a fierce and bloodthirsty baboon god and said to have full control over light and darkness, and he will be the one to open the sky for the king, seeing as his phallus is the only key to unlock heaven's door. It's also the mast for the ferry boat to said afterlife. This virility symbol is carried over into a later spell where in order to ensure successful sexual intercourse in the afterlife, a man must identify his sexuality to Babi before passing through. Okay, anyways, as early as the Old Kingdom, Babi represented supernatural aggression to which the monarch aspired. The terrifying god was said to live on human entrails, and thus protection spells were necessary to protect oneself against him, even if actively worshipping the deity. Don't want to be a munch, right? Protecting yourself was the most necessary pre-death, especially during the weighing of the heart ceremony in the Hall of Two Truths, when a person's suitability for paradise was determined.
Number 5, Chiron. I think the last video or the video before, I don't know, my brain is pretty scrambled, but I mentioned the story of how Ixion made love to a cloud and gave birth to half horse, half men people. Yeah, well, as confusing as that is, like, Where did those genes come from? Chiron was an exception to the rule. He was the son of the bond between Titan Cronus and a nymph and became a kind of honorary god. Unlike his other horny relatives, Chiron was a trusted, artistic, and intelligent being. He was still part horse, but his front legs were still human. So I guess imagine a man wearing half of those like 2 men horse costumes. Yeah. He didn't play the field, really, but was married to a nymph named Charicolo and had 3 daughters and a son. He trained fantastic heroes such as Achilles, Jason, Perseus, Ajax, and Heracles or Hercules. But his most noble act was giving up his mortality in order to free Prometheus. As a reward for his sacrifice, he became a fantastic constellation in the sky. Number 4. Delphine. The most confusing thing about Delphine is actually what she was supposed to be. A python, a dragon, and some ancient accounts equate her with Echidna, the mother of all monsters, a half woman, half snake being. She has also been confused for a male serpent, but according to the earliest Homeric hymn, she was a girl dragon. Anyone get that reference? No? Okay, moving on. There are quite a few different accounts of the goddess, and descriptions of her aren't really consistent, but we do know that she was a dragon type thing born from Gaia, the Greek goddess of earth. Her name means womb, and only us ladies really understand why a womb would be depicted as a dragon. The time of the month, I know. Delphine was given the charge of guarding the Oracle of Delphi. For some reason, Apollo really wanted to control it, so Delphine and him went head to head on several occasions. He eventually slew her with his bow, allowing him to take control, so unfortunately that happened. But hey, he's a god. Number 3. Medusa. The origin of her story has a few versions, but no matter what way of getting there, she ends up as a gorgon. Her hair full of snakes and armed with a petrifying gaze, Medusa is one of the most prominent figures in Greek mythology. The story of Medusa has come under some confusion recently. Some say that the god of Poseidon took her without consent, violating her oath to Athena, and therefore the goddess punished her. Some say it was consensual, some say that she just insulted Athena somehow, but this is the most popular story. Medusa, as a mortal woman, was said to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but remained an enchanting and steadfast priestess for Athena. Though at first Athena was proud of her subject, she became irritated that the people were only at the temple to see her, because she was fire. Poseidon didn't like Athena because she won Athens, so he tried to seduce the young maiden to get her angry. She refused because she's awesome and ran to the temple and prayed to Athena for protection, which the goddess gave her none, so Poseidon took her anyways. Athena punished her, saying it was her fault, though like, obviously it wasn't. Where the heck were you, Athena? Bad move. You'd think Athena would be half decent in this situation, but guess not. So she turned her into this ferocious gorgon, and then on the way out of the temple she ran into her best friend and turned him into stone and a whole bunch of other people. It's a really sad story. She wasn't a monster. I don't think so anyways. Number 2, Pygmalion and Galatea. We talked about Narcissus, and this story is kind of in the same vein. Like, you know, you fall in love with your own work of art. The world is wide and strange, and people marrying cars and objects is actually far from myth. It's actually happened, but like why? How? No clue. Which brings us to the strange tale of Pygmalion and Galatea. Pygmalion was a sculptor and carved incredible lifelike ivory creations. His dedication to his craft left him no time for love, and even swore to a life without wedlock. But this longing one day manifested in a statue he carved of a woman of unparalleled beauty. He could not take his eyes off his creation and named her Galatea. He clothed her, decorated her, kissed her. The guy was obsessed. The festival of Aphrodite was approaching, and he prayed and prayed she would come to life so he could marry her. Aphrodite, upon seeing the sculptor, was awestruck by her beauty and agreed. As you can guess, though unlike most Greek love stories, they lived happily ever after, which is unfamiliar for the Greeks, honestly. So many tragic stories. Greek tragedy is a thing. Number 1, last but not least, Io and Zeus. Yet another reason to be wary of clouds. I honestly don't know how the gods made love via vapor, but some things we will just never know. Io was a follower of Hera, and Zeus, upon seeing her one day, fell hard in love, or in lust. Depends. She constantly avoided his lustful attempts until one day Zeus decided to take what he wanted by surrounding her as a cloud and making love to her. Without consent. which is for some reason a word I can't say on YouTube, but you get the point. Hera figured that out, turned her into a white cow because she was mad, tied her to an olive tree, and had her guarded by a 100-eyed dog. Zeus then sent Hermes to get rid of him, which he did, but then Hera released the cow Io and plagued her with madness as she wandered around. While wandering, she met the poor titan Prometheus, who was cursed to have his liver torn out every day, and he comforted her by saying that she would one day return to her human form and bear a child by Zeus that would someday release him. Zeus caught up with her in Egypt, turned her back to human form, then her descendant, like 11 generations later, Hercules, released Prometheus from his chains. But wait, I thought that was Chiron. What?
Number 10, the griffin. More strong than 8 lions and 100 eagles. Originating in the Middle East and then being adopted in Greek literature, griffins are a majestic amalgamated blend of the body and back legs of a lion mixed with the wings, beak, and talons of an eagle. These mythical creatures were praised for the intelligence they apparently possessed, as well as the fact that they clearly had excellent patience as they mated with one other griffin for life. But don't think that makes them any less ferocious or fearsome. They would rip things apart with their giant beaks and talons and could fly victims to the skies. We believe the idea of the griffin was actually inspired when Scythian nomads interacted with dinosaur bones in Central Asia, specifically the bones of the dinosaur Protoceratops, which, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Kind of looks like a bird-like creature if you tilt your head maybe.
Number 9, the Loch Ness Monster. Hey lad, be careful when you venture out into the water's depths. That deep water has a beast hiding, just waiting to spring up and cause trouble. Yes, the Loch Ness Monster, maybe the most famous of all the mythical creatures. No thanks, of course, to all the hysteria that surrounds the watery lass. Ever since a black and white photo from the 1930s emerged, so did interest in this mythological creature. Maybe because people were bored, gullible, or just the thought of a prehistoric animal still alive. In modern times, well, it was thought-provoking. Some say it was a plesiosaur, some say it was a hoax, and funny enough, some think it was a whale's pichadille, which I had to include because it's very funny. Honestly, Adam and I googled whale gabagool and compared the two images, and you know what? Yeah, that's my accepted theory now. It was probably a whale gabagool.
Number 8, a basilisk. If you think I mean the snake from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, then no. Well, yes, but also no. See, in the earliest mention of the basilisk in ancient Rome, it was a snake-like creature with a sort of crown. But then you fast forward to the Middle Ages and this thing is a serpent with the head of a rooster and the wings of a dragon or a bat. I don't know how he made that jump, but hey, that's just how she goes. It apparently had a very de-lifing bite and venom breath, which is interesting. But its main defense was the fact that it could end your time on Earth simply by looking at you. Sounds like my ex. No mention of petrifying people though. The basilisk supposedly originated in North Africa, but tales of European encounters are much more frequent. One particular incident from 1587 Poland tells us how a man clad in a mirror-covered suit hunted and captured a basilisk after it consumed 2 small girls.
Number 7, Kraken. If nautical nonsense be something you wish, then ye came to the right place, sir. The Kraken, arguably the most terrifying sea monster ever. I know I said that before, but no, I said most infamous. Famous? I don't know. It's scary. I'd even argue it's scarier than the Megalodon. Put a Megalodon on land, he's basically an oversized Magikarp. Kraken? Ooh, those tentacles and suction cups, they're going to hurt. And Buddy's got reach. The Kraken in most depictions is a gigantic octopus or squid-like creature who can destroy large shipping vessels with its huge tentacles and send them down to Davy Jones' locker. In Norse mythology, some depictions of the octo beast are as big as islands, which, ooh, that's really big. Sometimes creatures like this and other mythological stories come with lessons or a tale of something, and usually these creatures have a weakness or an exploit on how to defeat such a beast. However, in my research, all it said was that they could be defeated, and not how.
Number 6, Blemmier. Ready for a weird one? In ancient times, Europeans who traveled to North Africa and Asia came back telling some pretty crazy tales, specifically of humanoids who would wander the wilds. The absolutely weirdest one would have to be the Blemmier from North Africa. They were big hairy dudes. That part ain't surprising, that's Big Chet over there. But they had no heads. Instead, they had a face on their chest, or even just eyes in the middle of their chest. I mean, look at the art our ancestors made of them. What even is that? Somebody call the police! What the? They became a hot topic of interest and discussed and appeared in all kinds of stories and art at the time. I, for one, would never like to see them again. Thank you very much. I would never like to see that again. Thank you. Thank you.
Number 5, the story of Mira. What is she pointing at? Ever been so sad and disheartened that you just wish you could turn into a tree? Yeah, me too. Then people could just leave me alone. However, the only person to ever successfully transform into a tree was Mira, who turned into the Mer Tree. But the story behind it is kind of messed up. Mira loved her father. A little too much. Like way too much. She was in love with her father and desperately wanted to be with him. She knew it was wrong and tried everything to resist the gnawing desire inside of her, even trying to take her own life. Her nurse found her and, fearing ever parting with her, decided to work up a scheme to hitch the two together. On the celebration of Bacchus, the queen hitched town, so the bed was empty. You see where this is going. Disguised as a maid, the nurse brought Mira to his bedchamber for 12 straight nights. On the final night, the king, overwhelmed with curiosity, removed the mask she was wearing. When he discovered that his lover had been his daughter, he reached for his sword and tried to kill her. Makes sense. Mira fled her father and ran across the desert for 9 months, and surprise, she was pregnant. When she couldn't run anymore, she begged the gods to hide her from the world. They took pity on her and turned her into the Mer Tree, which one day would be hit by a running boar, revealing the child Adonis tucked into the bark. Adonis was also supposed to be super hot and awesome, which totally doesn't play by the rules of like incest. Like usually something goes wrong there. Remember Joffrey? Like that didn't go well. Number 4, Ixion. This one is confusing because it prompts a question I've never wanted to ask. How do you even make love to a cloud? When Ixion, the king of Lapiths and the son of Ares, married Dia, the daughter of Dioneus, he promised him a gift. However, when Ixion reneged on the promise, Dioneus stole some of his horses. Enraged, Ixion invited him to dinner to make amends, but instead pushed him into a fiery pit of coals. I mean, he is the son of Ares, like what you expect. He was banished for such a crime because it was completely uncool, but after a few years, wandering sad and alone, Zeus took pity on him and invited him up to Olympus. That's a good idea, where Ixion got the hots for Hera. Zeus decided to see if he would actually even try it, like would he even try it? And so he sent him a cloud shaped like Hera. Ixion did try it, and he made love with the cloud, and even stranger, it got pregnant. Their union gave birth to the first centaurs, who were literally and figuratively horny little half-horse, half-human people that roamed the world. As further punishment, Ixion was thrown from Olympus, struck by Zeus's lightning bolt, and bound by Hermes to a fiery spinning wheel. Some people just really don't deserve your pity, man. They just don't. Number 3, Alcyone and Ceyx. This one kind of hurts my heart, if I'm being honest. The love story between these two is just something everyone longs for. They were admired by humans and the gods, and yet they were still punished for it. What? Alcyone was the daughter of the god of wind and devoted wife to King Ceyx of Trachis. They were so in love with each other, they often playfully called each other Zeus and Hera. Despite many of the gods admiring them, and this was clearly an endearment, Zeus wasn't pleased. How dare they compare themselves to the gods? So he waited until Ceyx planned to visit the oracle, against his wife's wishes, who was concerned the wind he faced would be too harsh on the sea. Even her father had difficulty controlling it. But he did, and Zeus stirred a storm that sunk the ship. With his last breath, Ceyx prayed his body would be brought back to his wife. Hera took pity on the mournful widow and sent a messenger and the body back to her. After burying her husband, she flung herself into the sea to be reunited with him. The gods were horrified by Zeus's actions because they loved the two of them, so he tried to atone for his rash action by transforming them into kingfisher birds. Yeah, Zeus, turning them into birds, it really fixes everything, don't? You're fine. Number 2, Pan. What a weirdo! Pan is literally the weirdest horn dog god who ever graced the planet Earth. Firstly, the way this dude came to be makes no sense. There are many versions, but one of them involves Odysseus' lonely wife getting jiggy with 108 suitors. Pan, like, stamina, right? Pan had the hind legs and horn of a goat and was the god of shepherds, flocks, hunters, forests, pastoral music, and fertility, the last one being the most prominent. Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye. would have been this guy's anthem. He pursued everything and everyone, nymphs being his favorite. They would be so desperate to get away from him, they'd have to turn into trees, Mira, reeds. Echo was even killed by his minions when she denied him. He could also multiply himself, creating like a swarm of Pan. He's also the only god who ever died, but no one is quite sure how that happened. So again, another confusing thing about him. Number 1, last but not least, Thyestes and Atreus. This next one will have your brain scrambled by the end. Thyestes and Atreus were brothers constantly at odds. While their father, the king of Mycenae, was away at war, they seized the city and Atreus became king. He sacrificed a lamb with a golden fleece to seal the deal with Artemis and gave the fleece to his wife, who was fooling around with his brother Thyestes, and she gave the fleece to him. Thyestes made his brother swear that whoever had the fleece would be king, and thinking that his wife kept it safe, he agreed. Thyestes then showed the fleece. Atreus, pissed off, asked the gods for help. Hermes told him to tell Thyestes to promise that he would be made king again if the sun went backwards in the sky. Thyestes agreed, thinking it was impossible, so Zeus made it happen. Then Atreus fed Thyestes his own sons for dinner unknowingly and banished him as punishment. Then an oracle told Thyestes that in order to exact revenge, his own daughter had to have his son. So he made that happen in the grossest way possible. And then, it sounds like I'm talking about some dramatic housewife show. And then the son grew up, killed Atreus, and Thyestes became king. But wait, Atreus' sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus, came back, overthrew him, and Agamemnon finally became king, ending the whole cycle. We're good. Alright, I'm tired after that one. Alright, number 10, Thor goes fishing. Jormungand was yet another one of Loki's creative offsprings, born to be the destroyer of Thor during Ragnarok. In order to prevent this, they threw the great beastly serpent into the water, and it was supposed to hold the world together until Ragnarok. But Thor was a little scoundrel and didn't mind risking it all. Aegir and Ran, 2 lovely, hospitable giants, as I heard, agreed to host the gods for an immaculate feast. But when Thor arrived, he consumed 2 of the 3 cows that they had brought for the feast. They were like, Thor, dude, that was supposed to be for everybody. So they're like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to go fishing the next day. Then Thor slaughtered one of their biggest bulls to use for bait, which also sucked, but that was gonna be okay, he was gonna be strong for fishing. Anyways, they get out into the waves, and while the one giant gets 2 whales, Thor heads out further with a bigger game on his mind. Jormungand was, after all, beneath the waves. He cast his line out, and sure enough, he got a massive bite. The force was so immense that it pulled his feet through the boat, and the serpent's head was coming up through the boat, about to bite him. Thor had his hammer ready to slay the beast, his mortal enemy, but then the giant cut the line because he got scared and the serpent slithered back into the water. And Thor was so mad, he threw him overboard. Literally, the worst guest to have at a party. Eats all your cows, almost causes Ragnarok, and then throws you into the ocean with a giant serpent at the bottom.
Alright, at number 9, good laugh. We all love a good laugh, right? Well, apparently a good laugh is what saved the Norse gods from facing vengeance from the giantess Skadi. You see, the gods killed Skadi's father and she demanded vengeance, but after a lot of negotiating with her, they were able to talk her out of that and instead offered her 3 things as reparations. The first was a husband of her choosing, however she could only choose him by his feet for some reason, don't ask me why. The second was having her father's eyes memorialized in the stars, and the third was just a good old laugh. Out of Skadi's 3 reparations, the hardest task was making her laugh. The gods tried everything to get a giggle out of the giantess, but nothing seemed to work. That's when Loki, the trickster god, came through and was basically like, step aside boys, let me handle this. And he sure did handle things. Loki then brought in a goat, tied a rope to it, and tied the other end to his nads, and proceeded to play tug of war with the goat. Like that. Both Loki and the goat screamed out in pain, as you could imagine, and Loki collapsed. And that is what made Skadi laugh.
Number 8, a little bit of incest. Why not? Can we even do a list about mythology without mentioning incest? No. Not probable. Why? Because, I don't know, the gods loved it. And people needed to populate the earth back then, so it wasn't too far-fetched of an idea. Anyway, even though Norse mythology doesn't love the idea of incest, doesn't mean it didn't happen. The goddess Signy fell into a pretty crummy marriage, and so to solve her situation, incest. She was married to Siggeir and didn't like him because 1, not a nice guy, and 2, not manly enough for her. He also was a terrible husband. He killed her father and all of her siblings, except for 1. Not cool, man. But the one that did survive, they teamed up to overthrow her hubby. Her 2 sons joined in, but they weren't ruthless killers and completely failed at all the times they tried to kill her dad. So she needed to up the ante, and that meant keeping it in the family, so she slept with her brother for 3 nights in order to spawn the force that would rid her of her husband. This son, when it came to fruition, knew what it was up and eventually assassinated her husband. Does this remind anyone of like a certain god origin story in Greek mythology? Let me know in the comments if you're thinking what I'm thinking.
At number 7, Loki the Mayor. When it comes to gods sleeping around with everyone and everything, Loki gives Zeus a serious run for his money. There are tons of stories about Loki hooking up with gods, people, and just about every other living thing. One of the weirdest stories about Loki's escapades is how he once had a night in the woods with a horse. Basically, the story here is that there was a horse that he really liked, a stallion named Svaldafari. Svaldafari was a horse who belonged to a mason worker who just so happened to be a giant. This giant really didn't like the gods and wanted them to just go away, and so Loki offered to help by distracting the giant's horse. Not really seeing how that's actually helping, but go off, I guess. Loki transformed himself into a mare, and then he and Svaldafari went off into the woods to mate. Horse Loki ended up getting pregnant and gave birth to an 8-legged steed named Sleipnir. Sleipnir then became Odin's steed, and this monster horse was actually featured in the Thor movie, so next time you watch it, keep an eye out for Loki's weird monster horse child.
Number 6, giant cloud brains. I do love gazing up at the clouds, making up stories like, that's a dragon, that's a chariot, that's a bumblebee. No one knew thousands of years ago that clouds are just dense collections of water vapor floating through the atmosphere, so when they saw things in the cloud, they thought they were real. So in a way, it kind of makes sense. According to Norse mythology, the world was made up from human severed body parts, specifically of the giant Ymir. His blood turned into the oceans, his flesh became the land, his bones the mountains, his teeth the rocks, his hair plants, and his eyelashes became Midgard. So as much sense as that makes, the clouds were his brains. His skull was tossed up into the sky, held up by dwarves, they're still up there. His brain was tossed separately, and that made the clouds.
Number 5, Holder. Okay, picture this. You're walking through a forest in Norse mythology. Nice. Doing as you do. Boy, what a nice forest this is, you say to yourself. I sure am grateful for the tree of life and Odin and all that stuff I have because of the such nice things, because I pray to them. Don't hurt me. When all of a sudden you spot a lady in the woods and hubba, she's gorgeous. She lures you in. She thinks you're handsome and doesn't care about your receding hairline, beer belly, and the big toenail that you should have got checked by a doctor months ago. I'm calling a lot of people out there. She wants you to marry her. Sounds too good to be true, right? Guys, come on, you know what I'm talking about. But you gotta be careful though, guys. You gotta be careful. Because if you saw her cow's tail before you married her, she keeps it. Or so the story goes. So yeah, they were ladies in the forest with cow tails, you had to marry them, and if you saw their tails before you were married, she'd have it for the rest of life. Makes sense. Sure. Number 4, elves. Elves, everyone loves elves, especially that movie, Elf. Everyone loves that one. It's like it became an instant Christmas classic. It's crazy. The population of elves seems to significantly increase when there's a fan expo in town. Go figure. Elves in Norse mythology represent a small divine figure, similar to the dwarves. They are creators of valuables and smithers, and had their strong place in mythology. And for some reason, when the elves were no longer needed in the land of Vikings and Mead, they went to go work for a fat man in a red coat in the North Pole. And before you even ask, yes, even Father Christmas has his roots in Norse mythology. And yes, before you ask, I know him personally, and I will be telling him who's naughty and nice this year. Christmas might be far away, but I'm watching. Ooh, we're watching. Don't you worry, me and Santa Claus. Ooh. Number 3, Kraken. This one actually surprised me. I didn't know this. I wasn't expecting this to be Norse. But yeah, the Kraken. In a nutshell, the Kraken is a huge octopus or squid-like creature that preys on the poor and doomed sailors who dare cross its path. Now, I'm sure a lot of you fear the deep water because, well, you can't see the bottom of it, and I think that's a rational fear. The reason for that, of course, is because you don't know what's big chillin' at the bottom of that water. The answer? It's the Kraken. That's horrifying. Using its large tentacles, it wraps itself around ships and brings them down to Davy Jones' locker. Or at least that's what happened in Pirates of the Caribbean. That's how I get my knowledge. In some Norse tales, the Kraken is as big as an island. Yeah, if you see an octopus just as big as an island, just turn the boat around at that point. There ain't nothing on the boat that's gonna deal with that business. Just turn it around. Turn the boat around. We're out of here. We're leaving. Just walk it off. Number 2, Droger. Okay, let me paint a picture for you. It's a late summer night in 2011. You're a couple inches too deep into your favorite couch. A calming music plays as you traverse the lands of Skyrim. You come across a door and begin to explore. What untold riches you will find in this dungeon, except first thing to greet you is an undead creature with pale gray flesh and eyes that glow blue like the sea. It charges you with a sword and gives off a grunt that sounds like your dad choking at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You slay the beast and try to read its name. Droger? There's no vowel there, Droger. You've unlocked a new ability. Dyslexia. Okay, so maybe that was my story, but the Drogers are the focus here. Skyrim is heavily influenced by Norse mythology. Droger is one of those things. They were undead creatures that would protect the tombs and graves from looters, as a lot of the warriors at the time were buried with such valuables. And yes, when I go into dungeons, I tip over everything. The pots, the wall, I check everything, gotta check everything. Number 1, Valkyries. Oh yes, the beautiful Valkyries. For such a gorgeous image, they have a rather grim job. Whenever someone falls in battle, it's up to these ladies to guide them to the afterlife. In a way, they're kind of like battle angels. It literally translates to chooser of the slain. I hope you folks have been praying towards Odin, otherwise you won't be able to make it to Valhalla, which is bad, because that's where all the good little Viking men and women go. You want to go there so they can be with their ancestors and eat and drink meat all day, and you want that. I know you do.
Number 10, the founding of Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs have a very strict set of rules when it comes to the appeasement of their gods. Just like any job, if the worker isn't happy, work isn't going to be done, or at least it isn't going to be done well. So when a god needs a little encouragement, the Aztecs will appease them with offerings of the highest value, human lives. In many respects, this is pretty cool, but it certainly didn't make them popular with other neighboring civilizations. For years they were just shoved around until the god Huitzilopochtli told them that he would aid them in finding their new home. All the citizens had to do was just look for a very specific signal, which would determine the land that they would call home. The symbol was an eagle perched on top of a cactus holding a snake in its mouth. And while wandering, lo and behold, a priest saw the signal, and when the people gathered, the cactus expanded until it became an island, and that island was thus dubbed Tenochtitlan, or the place of the prickly pear cactus. Number 9. Huitzilopochtli and his siblings. When the earth goddess Coatlicue was gifted with a child through a ball of hummingbird feathers, which is commonly denoted as the soul of a warrior, her other children, namely Sentzon Huitznawa, the 400 stars of the southern sky, and Koyolatsaqui, the goddess of the moon, decided that having a little brother would be more trouble than it was worth. I'm an only child, but my best friends are twins, so I kinda get the picture. As the siblings conspired to kill their mother and brother, Huitzilopochtli burst forth from his mother's womb, armed with a burning snake sword, battle-ready and fully grown. I can only hope it was a C-section. He defended his mother from the 401 siblings, beheading his sister and throwing her body to the earth. Sentzon Huitzna fled, and the image is used to explain why the sun, moon, and stars are chasing each other across the sky. Number 8. Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl's rivalry. The Aztecs' understanding of the world implies that there have been 4 times prior to this one that the gods have attempted to make humanity, and 4 times that the world has ended. Was it some great threat that wiped humanity off the face of the earth? Well, not exactly. See, the brothers Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl didn't exactly get along. The first time that Tezcatlipoca ruled the world, Quetzalcoatl destroyed it and then became the ruler of the second world. The third world was destroyed by Tezcatlipoca, hitting Quetzalcoatl just a little bit too hard. They didn't really get along that great. Number 7. Jeep Totec. One of the coolest things that can come from looking through various cultures' religions is the way in which they represent similar concepts. There are gods of storms, gods of war, and all of these differences between these types of gods can indicate so much about a culture and their values. In the case of Jeep Totec, this was a god that was meant to represent agriculture and the seasons, and ritual flaying, apparently. Unlike the other gods of harvest, Jeep Totec was a bit more given to a grim disposition, wearing a flayed skin which was meant to symbolize the changing of seasons. There is a certain beauty to this, as everything in Aztec culture was connected to human life in one way or another. Jeep Totec's fashion habits are just deeply symbolic in a way that is, well, both rational and kind of metal. Number 6. How Quetzalcoatl made humanity for the 5th time. A lot of stories in the Aztec mythos vary in terms of their understanding of events. As a result, what caused the 4th end of the world and the birth of Quetzalcoatl is a little vague, but one story about the creation of the 5th world, our current world, is deeply fascinating. Apparently, Quetzalcoatl went to Mictlan, the underworld, and constructed the 5th humanity from the bones of the other 4, using his blood from wounds to his earlobes, calves, tongue, and YouTube-friendly appendage.
Media always paints her as an eloquent gem, but in reality she's a bitter bee. It's Athena. The story of Medusa is often mistold, painting the young woman as a harlot with poor intentions. In reality, Medusa was an extremely attractive young woman minding her business outside of Athena's temple. It's here the god Poseidon accosts Medusa, forcing her into the temple and taking her against her will. Athena shows up and she's A, pissed that this is happening in her temple, and B, she had a fat crush on Poseidon at the time, so she victim blames poor Medusa for her own assault. This is when the twisted and bitter Athena turns Medusa into the iconic monster image we all know. A head full of snakes and everyone now incapable of even looking at her without turning to stone. That's a pretty traumatic thing to have follow up on what's already a very traumatic event. This is why Medusa is the homage image of women. And let's not forget another story that reminds us that Athena was not a girl's girl. How Arachne's weaving skills were so unparalleled that when she challenged Athena to try and beat her, Athena couldn't, and Arachne decided to weave a drunk Athena on her cloth to really stick it to her. Well, Athena was pissed and made Arachne feel such supernatural levels of guilt, she takes her own life. Athena then says oopsie daisy and gives Arachne a second life as a spider, since she likes spinning and weaving so much. Right. Alekwu is a god that prevents scandal in my opinion, but also causes some of it. This god is popular among the Idoma people of North Nigeria for his protection, maintenance of social order, and settlement of disputes, and more. He's a watchdog of their people, greatly feared for his ability to punish both offender and accomplice of a crime if it is not reported and atonement made within 7 days. Being omnipresent, don't think leaving town's gonna save you. He's able to protect and punish, with distance being no barrier. And after those 7 days are up to make atonement, within 14 to 21 he'll have hunted you down and killed you. This god is seen in a lot of conversations of adultery in Idoma land, as it's one of the most atrocious acts you could commit. Amen, by the way. Alekwu takes vengeance on them in 2 ways. For example, a woman who commits adultery and doesn't confess in 7 days will lose her first male heir and then any remaining heirs. Their deaths will be, to quote, obvious displays an offense has been committed against Alekwu. Also, any man who eats the food of a wife he is known to have cheated on him will be poisoned by it. If she doesn't fess up after all that, then she'll be stuck with paralysis until death unless a ritual cleansing is done, which is an apology to Alekwu. Inability to do so, as said, results in the guilty party kicking the bucket within the 7, 14 to 12 day mark. So remember, keep it in your pants. There's some countries where you'll get murked by a deity because you can't. Next up is one we're all pretty familiar with, the Abrahamic god, aka Dad of Jesus god, and he's probably the youngest god on this list, but that doesn't make him any less scandalous than his older cousins. Many weird stories appear in the Bible and the Torah, and it's still widely worshipped today, so Let's talk about them. The story of Abraham and his son Isaac, for example, where God literally dares Abraham to demonstrate his faith to him, an unseen, unproven being, by murking his son. And Abraham's reaction is say less, like an immediate jump to action to drop his son for the disembodied voice. He sits his kid on an altar, grabs a knife, and God has to jump in with the yo yo yo, I was just kidding, claiming it was all a test. Childhood memories with dad for Isaac, I guess. Another story is when God is just decimating the city of Sodom, fire, brimstone, all that jazz. As the Jews are fleeing his usual token massacre behavior, God asks them if they can do one of these and not look at his shameful annihilation. Lot's wife can't resist taking a peek at the drama, and as a witness to the destruction, she's turned into a pillar of salt. God knows why. Literally. The story of the Virgin Mary. Yeah, I don't think I gotta break that one down for you. That is a scandal in all capitals with waving red flags. Take it out of biblical context, it gets weirder and worse. The Bible has no shortage of crazy and scandalous stories about God. Back to Greece to learn about the man who left chaotic footsteps for Zeus to follow in. It's Cronus. Before the Greek pantheon of gods came the pantheon of Titans. The Titans were the result of the two main creation gods Uranus and Gaia, and Cronus was their preeminent and temperamental son. A nice way to gloss over the fact this guy was a raging psychopath. For example, when Daddy Uranus was getting shifty and hiding some of the wife's kids in the bottom of a literal abyss called Tartarus, Gaia decides that maybe it's time her husband's boys got the snip snip. When she was asking around for a volunteer, Cronus was practically pushing people out of the way. He sliced off his father's junk and tossed it in the sea, where it turned into sea bubbles and spawned Aphrodite. Anyways, after Gaia's Titan kids were freed, Cronus decided to re-imprison them, claim his dad's throne, and marry his own sister Rhea. Gaia, who just sorta lets this happen, pettily tells Cronus one of his own children would eventually overthrow him. Cronus said, alright, bet I'll just eat my kids. And like a paranoid lunatic, he did. Every kid his wife popped out, this guy munched up. Eventually, Gaia and Rhea trick the unhinged man-eater by giving him a rock and a baby blanket, and hide the true baby, Zeus, to one day fulfill the prophecy. Which he does, and then he becomes even more scandalous than his dad, because a family that train wrecks together stays together. And finally, it's the flighty perv Inanna, an ancient Sumerian goddess representing sex, war, and fertility. This bad bee is known for her prolific sexual desires and messy unions. She's a patron of lions and the planet Venus, and went through a name change at one point, so she's also known as Ishtar. Inanna had a hell of a temper, and she was not the goddess to cross. One man makes the perilous mistake of taking advantage of her sleeping body under a poplar tree. When she woke, in a fit of rage, she turned all the rivers in the world to blood, covered the earth in storms, and tormented everyone with disease. And when she found her attacker, whoo girl! Her consensual lovers didn't have it better though, as she had a tendency to sacrifice or just kill them. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, she tries to seduce King Gilgamesh, but he, while shaken in his boots, refuses her. Guess he had heard the stories of the speckled alala bird whose wings she broke, the lion who she dug a pit for, the horse she had whipped, the shepherd she turned into a wolf, the gardener who she turned into a dwarf. This list can keep going. Pissed about rejection, Inanna released the bull of heaven in an attempt to kill Gilgamesh, but Gilgamesh killed the bull instead. Inanna awkwardly attends the bull's funeral in the underworld, where as she passes through these 7 gates, she has to remove a piece of clothing or jewelry each time, leaving her naked and powerless. Not the brightest bulb in the box, homegirl sits her bare ass on the underworld ruler's throne, and he's not the happiest about that. He punished her by turning her into a human corpse and hanging her on some hooks. Most other gods just sort of watched and shrugged it off, but Enki decided to rescue her, and it would mean someone would have to take her place. Inanna refuses to sacrifice any of her servants, but she doesn't think twice about offering up her husband Dumuzi because he hadn't mourned her enough. Dumuzi's dragged to the underworld by demons, and Inanna has the audacity to mourn him for an eternity.
Number 10, Clash of the Titans. An Avengers level threat, baby. The Titans were the big bad giants who ruled over the earth and the gods. Naturally, they all got along, and there were never any problems, ever. Yeah, right. They fought like cats and dogs, though I never understood that because all the dogs and cats I know always got along great. But the Titans fought, and they fought some more, until your favorite boy Zeus had enough and kind of took control over everything. It's Zeus, it's what he does. It's too bad Aaron Yeager wasn't there to help out. Number 9, Prometheus. Poor Prometheus. This is my favorite tale from Greek mythology. I think it's rather sad for Prometheus. All he wanted to do was give us the knowledge of fire, and look at all the things that we did with it. Forged iron and steel heated our homes, so no one would ever go cold again. And we cooked, which gave Gordon Ramsay 23 hit shows and a reason to curse when asking for the lamb sauce. Where's the lamb sauce? Prometheus went directly against Zeus's orders, and if you didn't know, that's kind of a bad thing. It can wind you up in a rather unfortunate position. A position like being chained up and having a large bird come feast on your intestines. Like I eat mom's spaghetti. She makes a good spaghetti. Thanks, Mom. You make a good spaghetti. Number 8, Icarus. I think we can all relate to this one, or at least have been told a version of this when we were flush. Things were going good for us. In a nutshell, Icarus got some wax wings and gained the ability to flight. Mind you, that was probably the dream of many ancient peoples. After Icarus got his wings, he got a little arrogant. He wanted to push his wings to the limit. Kind of like Iron Man in the first Iron Man movie. But instead of falling in a multi-million-dollar supersuit and looking handsome while doing it, Icarus sniffed one too many of his own farts and flew too close to the sun, where he burned up in it. So what's the lesson learned here, folks? Keep yourself grounded and don't sniff your own farts. Number 7, Jason and the Argonauts. Avenger level threat acquired. For some reason in our lives, you find stories of our favorite heroes forming almighty and powerful groups. The Avengers, the Justice League, BTS. That one might have too much power. But yes, Jason and the Argonauts were a band of heroes on adventures, slaying beasts, taking names, and Greekifying the area. Sadly, for Jason and the Argonauts, every time they try and make a movie about it, it just never worked for them. I don't know. They had a visually impressive one in the 60s, and everything after that has just been a complete misfire. Hollywood, if your casting calls come my way, just know I make a great Jason. Look at me. I could be Jason. Got a sword, a shield, and there we go. That's it. Number 6, Hercules. Hercules, the strong one, or the one where Danny DeVito coaches him through the process of being a Greek legend. If Danny DeVito is coaching you through anything, that probably means you're gonna come out on top. And yes, before you start typing in the comment section, technically speaking, Hercules is the Roman copy of Heracles. I know. However, it's kind of one of those things that everyone just knows the one, so anytime a Greek dude shows up with muscles, you blush and you think of Hercules. As far as Greek mythology goes, it doesn't get any more classic than a super strong guy with abs and biceps, and maybe a little bit of olive oil on him, I don't know. Number 5, werewolf. Hey man, I just wanted to check up on you and make sure you're feeling alright. I know it was kind of strange that a large dog bit you in the full moon. Hey man, you're a lot hairier than I remember you being. And gee, your teeth are pretty big too. Say, what's that wagon going on behind you? I'm sure you're fine. Yes, werewolves, another classic, if you will. Part man, part wolf. And the ability to transform into said beast at a full moon. Some call it a power, some call it a curse. I think werewolves stand out on this list because they're so common. Werewolves were thought to be real in ancient Rome and most of medieval Europe. More interesting than a wolf that hungers for human flesh is the treatment for such an ailment. Some medieval remedies include hammering nails through hands. In Sicily, it was a knife through the skull 3 times. In Germany, if you said the person's Christian name 3 times, they would be cured. And in more recent times, silver. Just silver for some reason, or a silver bullet. So be mindful at night, folks. You may just need a hammer, nails, knife, Bible, telephone book, and a couple of quarters. The telephone book is so you can look up the Christian names.
Number 4, Sleipnir, the steed of none other than Odin himself. Sleipnir, or the sliding one of Norse mythology, was an 8-legged gigantic black horse that could carry itself and its rider across the land, sea, and through the air. Those 8 massive powerful legs also helped bring Odin Allfather from the realm of Asgard to Midgard, or Earth, and I'm sure Sleipnir could bring him to all the other realms as well. Sleipnir here came to be when the god Loki shapeshifted into a mare and became pregnant by the stallion of a giant. Well, that's how the myth goes. Look, I can't come up with this stuff, okay? Just believe me so we can move on. In art, the giant horse was the means of transportation used by shamans in their travels throughout the cosmos. So when they were straight up tripping on the magical mushrooms over in the forest clearings of Norway.
Number 3, dragon. Greetings, foul beast, for I am Sergeticus, knight of the not-so-round table. I have come to skewer your winged wickedness and end your sour reign, is what I would say if I was a knight in shining armor, with a broadsword and a shield. It's a classic story. There's always a knight and there's always a dragon that needs slaying. In European culture, dragons are depicted as large winged creatures, sometimes with the ability to breathe fire. Perhaps a representation or euphemism for a great challenge a knight may face. In Eastern culture like China, dragons have no wings and are more snake-like. However, both still look similar and both have the ability of flight. The Chinese dragon may also be able to use magic, so fire breather and sorcery. Ooh, somebody get my sword. It's gotta go. No, bad.
Number 2, Erymanthian boar. Hey, do you remember in the ancient extinct creatures video where we talked about Andrewsarchus, Andrew's ancestor? Well, I think this is it. A 1-ton boar with sharp and strong canine teeth. Only this one's in ancient Greece, not Mongolia, so maybe not. But the Erymanthian boar was part of the 12 heroic labors performed by the demigod Hercules. Hercules was tasked with capturing the boar that would come out every day and attack the people who lived by the Erymanthus mountain. Now, I don't know if you know, but boars are already just angry, jumped up pigs that have been known to literally end people's whole existences. So yeah, size those bad boys up with giant tusks and well, good luck, Hercules. It is also said that the boar was actually the god Apollo in different form, but I'm just gonna say it was Andrewsarchus, even though I'm 99% sure they were extinct at the time of the ancient Greeks.
Number 1, mermaids. Ladies, you gotta put yourselves in our shoes. Imagine Adam and me on a vessel in the ocean for months on end, starving, thirsty, and lost. But I can always get lost in your eyes. Anyway, suddenly some thick fog breaks, and there upon some shallow rocks is a woman who's missing her blouse and has a fish's lower half for her lower half. How can I not stop and ask for help and or directions? Of course every fish lady wants to be around men who haven't had a good wash since they left port. The myth all makes sense. In a nutshell, that's what it is. The only difference is whether or not the mermaid is going to help you or bring you to your demise. We'll see. I don't know.
Number 10, the dedication of Eclavia. You know what you shouldn't do as a teacher? Make a student who is really talented self-sabotage themselves so they don't beat out another kid, which is exactly what happened to Eclavia. Eclavia was a very talented young boy who lived deep in the forest among his tribe. He wanted to become the best archer in the world, and he was very well on his way to becoming it. However, when he asked to become a student of the great Drona, he was denied due to his poor social standing. But Eclavia was not deterred. He built a statue of his idol instead and let it inspire him as he practiced archery every day. He became so skilled that when Drona learned of this, he was afraid he would surpass his best student, Arjuna. So he demanded Eclavia payment for studying under him, even though it wasn't technically under him, in the form of his right thumb. Then, sadly, this story doesn't really have a happy ending. The boy cut off his thumb right there and then, forfeiting his dreams of becoming the best in the biz. So overall, work hard to get where you want to, and then give over to jealousy and let someone cut your thumb off so that you'll never achieve it. Number 9, Manushwa. Confusing and terrifying? We love a little bit of everything here on Bumblebee, which is why I bring you Manushwa, a terrifying creature slash demon that delights in scratching the faces off its victims. A very specific thing, leaving them for dead. No one quite knows what it looks like, but the most common description is a hairy spider with soulless eyes. Spiders already have soulless eyes, I hate them. They are known for attacking only at night and sometimes cause strange blackouts before they attack. Now, many believed for a long time that it was simply the stuff of legend, a scary bedtime story told to make sure children behave. But in the early 2000s, the town of Kanpur, India blamed several attacks on the creature. Several people reported attacks at night and awoke with strange abrasions on their faces. Even more mysteriously, the victims entirely blacked out on the events leading up to it. Police as well as civilians became so convinced that it was real and it was attacking their community that they led special searches at night. But then, almost as soon as they had begun, the attacks stopped, leaving behind yet another legend of a bedtime story becoming real. Number 8, the devotion of Surdas. Genuine question for all of you. If you saw the most beautiful thing, place, person in the world and knew that nothing else would ever be as perfect, would you wish to keep your sight or have your sight taken away because nothing would ever come close to it? Personally, I'd probably keep my sight because you never know. But Surdus was so devoted to Lord Krishna that he had his sight taken away again. He loved Krishna so much that he wrote song after song in his praise. Surdus was a blind man but had a heart for music. One day Surdus fell into a well and Krishna saved him. Radha, his companion, became jealous, and against Krishna's orders saying to stay away from him, she went to him anyways. As she passed, Surdus clutched onto her anklets. When he wouldn't let go, she revealed herself, but Surdus couldn't confirm her identity, so he held on. Krishna then graced him with vision and let go of the anklets. He was so stunned at having finally seen his hero that he asked to be blind again, as nothing would ever come close to it. My question is, if he was blind since birth, how would he even know what Radha looked like to identify her? Would he just have been overwhelmed by her amazing goddessness? I don't know. Number 7, Nishidak. Have you ever turned around at your desk thinking someone just called your name? Or could you have sworn you heard someone say your name walking home alone at night in the dark? This has definitely happened to me, and it certainly makes me wonder whether there is a supernatural reason. Otherwise, why does almost every culture have a myth related to voices in the dark? The Nishidak from Hindu mythology is a dark entity that lures travelers deep into the forest areas by making it sound like a loved one is calling to them. This is the moment where curiosity could kill the cat, because if it got the better of you, you could end up dead. The voices will lead you to a deserted area away from prying eyes, and then snap, it will devour you. But what if it's actually someone I know who needs help? Well, there is one way to tell. Wait for them to call a third time. The Nishidak can only say your name twice, so if it no longer says it again, keep moving, as it is surely the Nishidak. Number 6, Nail Ba. Part of the role that mythology plays is to establish rules and boundaries for society, especially children. If you don't want a young one playing by the river alone, you tell them a scary story about a monster who lives there, so they won't go near it. But did they really have to go this hard with this one? Damn! Nailba is a terrifying, dark, demonic spirit that walks the streets visiting people's houses. Her name has been written on the doors and walls of small towns and villages in rural Bangalore to deter the spirit from entering. Some variations of the myth say that she is the spirit of a wandering bride seeking her husband. If you open the door to receive her, she will take the man of the house and bring bad luck to the household. Another version says, which is kind of where it gets confusing, says that should you open the door in the first place, you will be cursed to die within 24 hours. Apparently she speaks in the voices of your friends and family in order to appear more trustworthy. Villagers write her name on the door to ward her off, as they should.
At number 5, mead and poetry. There are many creation stories for Norse gods that are pretty weird. The gods were created from all kinds of things and it's a little complex, but one of the weirder creation stories is that of the god Kvasir, known to be the wisest of them all. The story goes that the gods just won a war and they were looking to celebrate their victory with a special drink. They all chewed berries and spat them out to ferment them and create alcohol. However, instead of making a drink, they made a person, and that person was Kvasir. His name literally translates to fermented berry juice, so it really doesn't get more straightforward than that. This new god became the smartest god to have ever existed. He was known to share his wisdom with anyone who would listen and traveled far and wide to share his knowledge. Sadly though, he was too wise for everyone and Kvasir was killed by dwarves and they drained his blood. They then used this blood to create a special kind of mead that granted poetic skills to those who drank it. It is believed that this drink was the birth of poetry, so Kvasir's death ended up creating something beautiful after all.
Number 4, kitten footsteps. If you have a dog that's a little tempestuous and keeps breaking out of their collar, then listen up. We've been doing it all wrong. The strongest collar is one that's embedded with the sound of cat footsteps, such as the one used to keep Fenrir at bay. Fenrir was a colossal wolf offspring of the god Loki because again, he was super creative when it came to having kids. The gods were so afraid of him that out of the 3 monsters Loki had, this one they kept under lock and key. They reared him up as a pup and the only god fearless enough to approach him was Tyr, the upholder of law and order. As it grew, they kept putting chains on the beast, clapping every time Fenrir broke through them to disguise their intent as a test of strength. But soon they sought out the dwarves, because they were awesome, for their skill. They forged a chain of unequivocal strength. Instead of metal, it was made from the sound of cats' footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of mountains, the breath of fish, and the spittle of bird. All things that don't exist. When they showed Fenrir, he suspected something was up because it was so light, so he asked for a god to put their hand in his mouth as collateral. Tyr did so, knowing that he would lose his hand because it was gonna work. He did, and Fenrir, unable to break it, was transported to an isolated keep, and there he stayed until Ragnarok, because he's gonna kill Odin.
At number 3, target practice. We all know about Odin's son Thor. He is the most famous child of the Norse Allfather, but you might not know about Odin's other son, Balder. Balder was known for being well liked by everyone. Well, maybe not everyone. Loki was the one person who didn't like Balder, and he ended up being Balder's undoing. One night, Balder started having nightmares where he pictured his own death. This had his mom really worried, and so, as any mother would do, she sought out to protect her child at all costs. She went to everyone and everything in existence, including inanimate objects, and she asked them to take an oath promising to never hurt Balder. These oaths were no joke, and as everyone agreed to take this oath, this essentially made Balder invincible. The gods found this so great, so they made a game where they would use Balder as target practice and would throw weapons and other miscellaneous items at him, only for all of them to just bounce right off of him. This was all fun and games until Loki got fed up with Balder being the center of attention. Loki ended up finding the one thing that Balder's mother did not get an oath from, and that was mistletoe. Loki then made a spear out of mistletoe, and the next time the gods played their game with Balder, Loki gave the spear to someone who threw it at Balder, and then he died.
Number 2, a naughty little squirrel. Everyone has that friend that loves the drama so much that most of the time they are the drama. And of course, everyone has had squirrels ruin their gardens or outdoor wiring at some point. How on earth did these two things relate? Well, let me introduce you to Ratatosk. In Norse mythology, all creatures live on the Tree of Life, which includes a little squirrel who loves to cause the drama. Specifically between a dragon and an eagle who live on the tree. Ratatosk's job is to ferry messages throughout the tree, and quite often the dragon and the eagle love to insult each other. The squirrel loves it so much that he will even lie to keep it going, but it doesn't stop there. He will even spread gossip and unrelated news to the other gods. The squirrel will do anything to keep the hatred flowing throughout the tree, which somehow explains how rude squirrels are most of the time. Like, honestly, what the heck. Except one time, one came up on my shoulder and like just hung out, and it was really nice. So they're not all bad.
Finally, at number 1, Thor the Bride. If you know anything about Thor, it's that he loves his hammer Mjolnir more than anything, and if he loses it, he would move heaven and earth to get that sucker back. Well, Thor's hammer was once stolen by a giant named Thrym, and Thor and Loki came up with an insane plan to get it back. Thor tried to negotiate with the giant to give him back his hammer, but the giant said that the only way he would return Mjolnir to Thor was if he could marry Freya. That was certainly not going to happen, at least not for real. Thor decided to impersonate Freya instead and marry the giant, and when Loki caught wind of this plan, he decided to join. Loki disguised himself as a handmaiden in order to watch this whole thing unfold. The giants ended up buying Thor and Loki's disguises, and they made it to the wedding feast. The giants were getting a little suspicious because he seemed manly, and especially when it came to his appetite, but that didn't matter in the long run because the moment that Thor was able to get his hands on Mjolnir, he not only left the giant at the altar, but he killed the giant and all of the wedding guests too. Sounds like the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, honestly.
Number 10, the Papal Schism, or Schism, who knows. Suffice it to say that the Pope is a pretty big deal in the Catholic realm of religion, pretty much the CEO of loving Jesus the most, but it is also a position of immense power, which means there is a lot of competition for the next one in line. Usually there is one reigning Pope at a time, but at one point there were 3, because there was so much rivalry. Between 1378 to 1417, there wasn't just one, not 2, but 3 rival popes, each with their own following of Sacred College of Cardinals. After 70 years of Pope Clement V living in Avignon, France, the Roman populace wanted a pope that was like at least Italian. Can we just get an Italian? When Pope Urban VI was elected, he proved so hostile that a bunch of cardinals went back to France and elected their own pope because the other one didn't count. They didn't like him. He thought thought he was voted in because people were afraid. They probably were. They elected Clement VII, who lived in France, so now there were two popes. Two popes, as you can guess, had a disastrous effect on the church, so people were like, okay children, if you can't play nice, either both of you resign or we will pick one for you. The popes refused to concede because they were like, no, I don't want to be pope. So cardinals arranged the Council of Pisa and elected a third pope, because that'll solve everything, Alexander V, who succeeded John the 23rd. John formed the Council of Constance, then was kicked out of papacy by said council. Then the Roman Pope, who is now Gregory XII, resigned the Avignon Pope, who was dismissed. Eventually, the whole schism ended when Martin V was elected in 1417. It's just so confusing. I feel like I want to vomit. Too much popes.
On number 9, Bone Wars. The early days of paleontology were intense and pretty cutthroat. Since this was a relatively new science with a plethora of things to discover, so many researchers set out to learn and find as much as they could, and this created a lot of rivalries since everyone wanted to gain notoriety for their findings. The competition was intense, but nothing could ever measure up to the rivalry between Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. These two rival paleontologists did everything in their power to throw each other off or to disprove them, and the lengths that they went to accomplish this was almost unbelievable. Both of them took off to Montana and Utah to dig up as many fossils before the other guy did, but they just didn't stop at digging. They each hired spies and saboteurs to get in the way of others' work, and they even tried to pass off fake skeletons as well. This is where we got the Brontosaurus controversy. One of the scientists had discovered the dinosaur known as Apatosaurus, and so the other one had to one-up him and introduce his own species named the Brontosaurus. The only problem with it though was the fact that it was a skeleton of the same dinosaur but with an intentionally placed skull from another dinosaur. It was a fake. This back and forth was intense in the scientific community and made for some pretty unbelievable stories.
Number 8, The Man in the Iron Mask. It is kind of crazy that this story actually exists, and it could be nothing. It could have been some dude who had syphilis who didn't want anyone to see his But the world remains convinced that he was more than he seemed. The movie, The Man in the Iron Mask with Leonardo DiCaprio, John Malkovich, has one theory that the man was actually the twin brother of the king. But the true identity of the Man in the Iron Mask remains a 350-year-old mystery. But it happened! In 1669, a man was arrested and put in prison for 30 years and was held in the infamous Bastille prison in France until he died in 1703. He was never seen without a black velvet mask or an iron mask. It's also described. No one knew who he was or for what possible reason he was put in there. The likes of Voltaire and Alexander Dumas tried to speculate who he was, and more recently Paul Saninio, a professor at the University of California, believed he was Eustache Dauger based on prison accounts and the guard. Dauger was in the prison at the same time as the masked man and was once transported in a chair covered so people wouldn't see him. But still, nothing has been confirmed, and I just think it's really cool and I like the speculation.
At number 7, Valentinian the First. You know when you see someone get really mad and a lot of the time there's that one vein in their head that just pops out while their face turns red? Well, that thing unalived someone once. That's right, a person once got so unbelievably angry that they died. Roman Emperor Valentinian the First was known to be a pretty hot-headed guy, and during his monarchy he had rivals in Danube called the Quadi tribe. Valentinian was very invested in this rivalry and they were in constant conflict with one another. In November of 375 CE, Valentinian received a note from the Quadi tribe demanding that they be left alone in peace as they supplied new troops to the army of Rome. On top of that, some Quadi troops also claimed that this whole feud between them and the emperor was because of the Roman forts that were built on their land. They even claimed that because of this, they weren't obligated to follow any of the terms of the Roman treaty and that they could attack whenever they wanted. As you could imagine, hearing all this stuff from his rivals really ticked off the emperor. He got so mad that he started yelling at Quadi agents, and his yelling was so intense that a blood vessel in his brain ended up bursting and he passed away shortly afterwards.
Number 6, the Great Emu War. I thought this event was a joke for like a very long time, but like many on this list, It actually happened. It all started in 1932 when a large emu population began devastating farms. Many of the farmers were ex-soldiers, and after the devastation persisted, petitioned for military aid to defeat the pests. Keep in mind that emus can grow as tall as like 6.5 feet and have really sharp claws. They're fierce. We didn't know how fierce until the Minister of Defense, George Pierce, deployed troops and expected to eradicate the pests, I don't know, very quickly. But they were in for a surprise. They vastly underestimated these killer cunning birds, as they soon proved impossible to hit with machine gun fire. They just like barreled forward like Superman getting hit by bullets. Like they were like, it didn't even matter. They would get hit and then just keep running. They were so fast that even their vehicles couldn't keep up with them. It's so funny. Within a week, the military gave up and they killed only like 50 to 200 emus out of like 20,000 of them. George Pierce earned the title of Minister of the Emu War. What a way to go. Eventually they did try again later that November, which resulted in 284,700 deaths of emus between 1945 to 1960. But dang, that is some pest control. But we all know that girl on TikTok who has like emus and she like puts her hand out when they try and hiss at her. They needed her. She would have just like dummied the whole population and they would have followed her like the Messiah.
Number 5. Tezcatlipoca's challenge. Aside from his brotherly rivalry, Tezcatlipoca was a bit of a mischievous little scamp. Stories tell that he would sometimes walk the earth as a skeleton with a beating heart, other times as a headless man streaked with red and white stripes. This terrifying image would wander around at night, seeking warriors who were doing the same. Once he found a warrior, Tezcatlipoca would challenge them to pull his heart from his chest. If they could, he'd promise to reward them with riches and power. Never actually did that though, just kinda like my buddy Dylan, who still owes me that transformer that I lent him back in elementary school. Come on, Dylan. Number 4. Huitzilopochtli rips out his nephew's. Back to Huitzilopochtli, with just the best family relationships. See, he had a nephew by the name of Kopil. Feeling ashamed for his uncle's behavior, Kopil tried to raise an army to capture his uncle. Now they decided to rest on an island one evening, but Huitzilopochtli's spies informed him of his nephew's little scheme. He ordered his priests to go and steal Kopil's heart, and under the dead of night they did just that. When asked what to do with it, they were told to bury it on the island where Kopil had come to reside. The next morning, the heart had grown into a cactus, fed by Kopil's courage, and plot twist, that cactus was the cactus that Huitzilopochtli used as a base for the symbol of the prickly cactus, which would lead the Aztecs to Tenochtitlan. Number 3. Tezcatlipoca tricks his brother. Back to Tezcatlipoca, this one's a doozy. So Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca just don't get along in any way. Quetzalcoatl is a big honorable warrior, Tezcatlipoca is a little bit of a sleazeball. They're really just oil and water, you feel? Well, Tezcatlipoca had just about enough of his goody two-shoes bro, so one night he managed to get Quetzalcoatl brutally wasted. This caused Quetzalcoatl to go to his sister Quetzalpetli, and Anyways, it wasn't great. Waking up the next day, Quetzalcoatl was so ashamed of his behavior that he just had to bolt. One story has him immolating himself on a pyre, his ashes floating into the sky and forming the morning star. The other one has him just kind of sailing away on a raft made out of snakes. Number 2, the heart-powered sun. I think we could all agree that the sun is pretty important. It's a nice little piece of astral stuff that, just keeps us all alive. In the creation of the fifth world, the gods decided that they were gonna have to make a new one, but they didn't exactly know how to do this. Holding a meeting, they decided that the best way to go about this would be to hold a contest. One of the weakest gods, Nanahuatzin, decided to compete, Painted white and covered in feathers, the dude yeeted himself into a fire with reckless abandon, where a black eagle caught him and carried him into the sky. This was pretty good until Nana Watson realized that he couldn't move. He explained that he'd need their blood and hearts to help him move across the sky. There was a bit of consternation, a few slung arrows, but the gods eventually acquiesced to his demands, which was how the modern day's sun came into being. Number 1. Tezcatlipoca's Dance of Death. One more Tezcatlipoca story, I promise. This dude's hilarious. So, our boy's just chillin', doing god stuff, when a bunch of townspeople tried to kill him. Why? Their plan didn't work, and so Tezcatlipoca decided to bring them down to the town center and challenge them to a dance to the beat of a song that he was singing. They obliged, and he kept them dancing, speeding up the beaten tempo until he danced them right off a cliff. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that there is actually a historical precedent for people dancing themselves to death in cases of mass hysteria, so this story might actually be truer than you'd think.
Starting off with some geography, we got Lake Nyos. How can a lake kill 1,700 people? Well, though it sounds too insane to be true, it did indeed happen. Located in West Africa, the lake itself is deceptively beautiful. However, on August 21st, 1986, a mysterious cloud burst from the lake. It flooded towards the village and suffocated 1,700 people and animals. Nothing survived the event. The reason this happened is because beneath the water there is a pocket of magma that leaks carbon dioxide into the lake. The CO2 stays dissolved in the water due to the pressure of the 650 feet of water on top of the magma secretions. Crazy, so kind of like a pop bottle with an invisible lid. Until one day, that lid popped. On that day, the lake abruptly depressurized and the CO2 exploded into the air, causing the devastating event. Today, pipes are used to siphon the CO2 out from the bottom of the lake in order to prevent this from happening again, but imagine when it did happen, it must have felt like some kind of magical grim occurrence. For sure. Number 9, the Salem Witch Trials. If you follow me on MA, you just know how much I hate the Salem Witch Trials. I hate them so much, okay? It's an event in history that is so inconceivably stupid, it's hard to believe it actually happened. The Salem Witch Trials occurred in Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693, where more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft and 20 were put to death. It all started because the daughter of Reverend Paris, Elizabeth, who was 9, and his niece, Abigail Williams, same age, started having fits. Another girl, Ann Putnam, age 11, started having them as well. The supernatural was blamed, and soon the girls began accusing everyone they could, mostly people the town didn't like. Basically, if you confessed and you wanted to be saved, then you weren't executed, but if you were accused and didn't confess, you were killed. The paranoia was so bad that once you were accused, you couldn't escape this guilt they put on you. It was insane. But after the paranoia finally subsided, the colony admitted that they probably made a mistake and compensated the families. Like, yeah, oops, might have gotten a little carried away there. Wow, whew, I got excited, sorry guys. Here's some money. The Salem Witch Trials today represent what happens when paranoia rules a courtroom and the whole thing still beguiles the world even 300 years later. Number 8. Unsinkable Sam. On a happier note, this is the kind of story that makes people believe that cats have 9 lives. Unsinkable Sam was the nickname for a cat who survived several shipwrecks during World War II. His tale begins aboard a German warship called the Bismarck. Among the 2,200 soldiers was a black and white cat that somehow snuck aboard. One day, the Bismarck was decimated during an attack, and while the HMS Cossack was looking for survivors, they saw Oscar the cat, name at the time, seeking refuge on a plank, like Jack from the Titanic. They hauled him aboard, but then several months later, the Cossack would be decimated. That's shipwreck number 2. This time, it was the HMS Ark Royale who spotted him, and was then dubbed the name Unsinkable Sam. And then, shipwreck number 3. Months later, as you can guess, the Royale was torpedoed, and once again, Sam was saved by the HMS Legion of the British Royal Fleet. Finally, this seafaring feline retired to land and later died in 1955. Number 7. Nellie Bly. Nellie Bly is a woman right out of a Jules Verne novel. In fact, you would think so if she hadn't met the man himself. In 1889, Nellie Bly took on a record-breaking voyage by traveling around the world in just 72 days. Her means of travel included a train, a steamship, a rickshaw, horse, and donkey. Her goal was to beat the fictional record set by Verne's hero Phileas Fogg in his 80-day Odyssey. An event like this already appeared as a myth to the men of the time. Her editor at the New York World nearly refused to send her because her gender would make the trip impossible. No one but a man could do this, he told her. Very well, she replied. Start the man and I'll start the same day for some other newspaper and beat him. He backed down, and eventually Nellie was on her way, turning fiction into reality. Number 6. The Black Museum. No, I'm not talking about the Black Museum episode of Black Mirror, but honestly, not too far off. People have done some pretty vicious things to their enemies. There's a long list, but imagine turning your enemies into a permanent dinner guest. Because that's exactly what Ferdinand I of Naples actually did. Though everyone thought he was going to be a great king, he actually ended up being pretty psychotic. He would invite his enemies over for dinner, and while they gorged on pheasant, he would take them out, either the old-fashioned way, or literally throw them out of a window. He would then retrieve and dress the bodies and stage them. He called it his Black Museum and would invite new acquaintances to view it so they would know exactly who they were dealing with, so not to mess with him. What a psycho!
Hi, Sisyphus. Oh baby, do I feel this one. Story of my life, honestly, day late and $1 short. Some of you folks at home may also share the same fate as me and this chiseled Greek man doomed for eternity. This one is also one of my favorites. Basically, Sisyphus was cheating the devil. Cheating death itself, actually. After sliming his way out of the underworld one too many times, Big Daddy Zeus had to intervene. Also, when I say I relate to him, it's not because I'm a trickster who cheats my demise or cheats the devil or Hades. I'll explain. So, after Sisyphus had done what he'd done, Zeus sentenced him to roll a giant boulder up a hill for eternity. When he gets to the top, she rolls back down to the bottom and he has to start all over again. Every day for the rest of time. Not just life, for time. Sometimes in life it feels like you're on a grind and you work and work and work, and sometimes you go right back to square one no matter how hard you work. That sucks and that can be exhausting, but never give up, because Chetty ain't, and neither should you. Number 4, King Midas. The lesson in this one, folks, is to be careful what you wish for. King Midas was being granted a wish. He wished for anything I touch be turned to gold. Now, I'm not an economist because I already have too many jobs on the internet, but you can imagine how at today's rate of gold, how wealthy you would be. Sheesh! Yeah, gold was valuable back then, but now, wowie woo. So his wish was granted, and everything he touched turned to gold, which, for a good couple hours, must have been the most fun anyone has ever had, ever. Dude was seeing drachma signs. However, this wealthy gift he had been given quickly turned into a curse, or a burden. Everything he touched turned to gold. That included his food. Because of this, he starved. To fix this burden, he bathed in a river, and it's said that's why gold can be found in that river. I wouldn't mind having that power myself, but if I made food gold, or even worse, what if I made my beer gold? Number 3, Narcissus. This one's in the name. Basically, there was a guy named Narcissus, and he was gorgeous. Like George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Ryan Reynolds gorgeous, all put together. Oh. And he knew it, and he loved his image. Now, as a guy who goes on camera every day, naturally, you hate yourself. You hate your self-image. That's how it goes. Ask anyone here, they would tell you the same thing. But also, as someone who's on camera every day and funny from time to time, you kind of like yourself on camera and you kind of like your self-image. It's a very strange relationship we have. However, no one is as bad as it comes to as Narcissus. One day in the forest, he came across a body of water where he saw his reflection cast, and it was so handsome, so gorgeous, that he couldn't look away. Ever. Hence the name Narcissist, or Narcissist. Or what most girls in high school find out what their boyfriends have. Narcissism. Ladies, let me know. Have you ever dated someone who has narcissism or looked in the mirror too long? Let me know, I'm curious. Number 2, Medusa. I feel like a lot of people know this one. Medusa, the half beautiful lady, half head of snakes in her head, and half monster thing with powers. Yes, I realize that was 3 halves and that doesn't add up, but you're talking to a guy who was voted class clown in the high school yearbook and not voted most likely to succeed in math. Because I just wouldn't. But she was the Gorgon monster who would turn men into stone. I do know that. If they looked into her eyes. That wasn't until your boy Perseus showed up like Link with the mirror shield and gave her a taste of her own medicine. What's the lesson on this one? I'm not sure. Maybe it's don't be so sure of your abilities. Maybe it's seeing things through. Or maybe it's having an extensive knowledge of tactics from a late 90s Nintendo character. That you never know when you're going to need that. You never know. I know that stuff. It can come in handy. Number 1, Pandora's box. I know you guys know this one, but this one is so simple. At first glance, it's not about turning things into gold or weird snakehead ladies or giants rising from beneath the earth to fight each other. It's a box. Something ain't good in that box, but it's just a box. So don't open it. I'm gonna say it again because there's gonna be people in the comment section that are gonna say, but Chetty, because you said don't open it, that means I really wanna open it. Imagine I'm Robert De Niro telling you not to open it. Nope, no way. Nope, not gonna happen. Nope, null and void. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's how you know I'm serious, because I did a bad impression. Oh great, somebody opened it. Yes, that's right. Pandora's box was opened and it said that all the evils of the world were released from the box. Good tale, good moral, but who the heck thought putting all those evil things in the world in the box was a great idea? Whatever happened to just having memento boxes? You know, you open up a thing like this is the time I farted on camera, this is the time I went to the cottage, you know what I mean? Whatever happened to that? Okay, we're gonna finish off with some comments today. I love reading comments, you guys are so awesome. Crazy Alley Cat 247 said, love the name by the way, my friend and her brother went to Pompeii and took photos. Oh my gosh! Were those photos awesome to look at? That's a reference to the Ancient Cities video. Yes, Pompeii is beautiful. That is one of the places, there's a few, I would love to travel at some point in my life, and Pompeii is absolutely on that list. I think it's an amazing, it's a well-preserved ancient city, as well as much as we've uncovered, and a lot of cool history there, as maybe a history guy, and just, and who knows, it's beautiful, Mediterranean, it's beautiful. Okay, Joseph Walker said, looks like I'm not the only one enjoying your company. Thank you. You are funny as hell. Thank you again. You can make gross boils farts, even boiling someone freaking funny. But I watch all you guys and turn my friends on your channels. Keep the laughs and knowledge coming. Thank you very much, Joseph Walker. Thank you. A compliment for me, a compliment for everybody. You're just like Oprah handing them out, dude. Everybody is getting a compliment. I love that. I'm so glad you're enjoying the content, and I'm glad you think I'm funny. That's good. That's a good thing. As a comedian, I like that. That's we like that. Okay, and finally, Erica Russell said, looking really good up there, Andrew. Thank you. I love it when you talk nerdy to me. Yes, Chad, that Pokemon joke you made totally landed with me. I wasn't sure if the Pokemon joke was gonna land, but I'm glad it landed with somebody. So thank you, Erica Russell, because sometimes you gotta commit to the jokes, and sometimes I don't know if it's funny, but I did fart, and that made Chris laugh, so.